Here we are back with the low man. The rain has stopped on the climb for the minute, but as you can see, the roads are still wet. It's a long, steady climb, this. He looks as though he's still going very, very strongly indeed, as he now goes under 10 kilometers to the finish, or 6 miles. And this has been a memorable day for him today.
Well, that 6 miles is going to take him around about 20 minutes on a slope like this, because he won't be doing very much more than 16 to 18 miles an hour. This is the big group of all of the major contenders, and it seems, Phil, as if it's actually swollen somewhat over the valley road there. Another Banesto rider has got himself onto the back of that group, and that in fact was Leonardo Pipoli, the climber from Banesto. These are the two men who've been doing most of the work on the front, trying to pull back the advantage of men like Richard Virenque, Fernando Escartin and Jose Maria Jimenez. Guerini is the long, lanky figure on the front for Telecom, and Enrico Zaina is the man in second position there with a little goatee beard. Michael Bogard is in there as well in the orange and white. He's actually, Phil, looking fairly comfortable today on the early slopes of this climb, and Alex Zuller is also in there on the left-hand side. Armstrong is in this group as well, but they are still losing big time on Richard Virenque. It's 2.5 minutes from Virenque's group back to this group, containing most of the leaders.
This is the Armstrong group down here, with Marco Pantani's Enrico Zaina setting the pace, and I'm wondering if he's preparing a springboard for little Marco to attack shortly.
Well, just check out the position of Marco Pantani in this group. He's actually moved forward. He's got rid of the racing cape he was wearing before. He's got rid of the arm warmers. He's stripped down to the lightest he can possibly be, and certainly I would be expecting to see him when we get to the steeper gradient to launch an attack, because this, in the old days of Marco Pantani, certainly was his terrain. The mountaintop finish was an area where he was almost unbeatable.
Well, he started the day such a long way behind overall, and he's still a lot of ground to make up in the Tour de France. 86 this morning, 11 minutes off the race lead. He will fly up the classification on time tonight, because a lot of the riders in front of him, of course, are now many minutes behind him, including the race leader, Alberto Elli. But the men he would like to be ahead of are right alongside him and losing no time.
There he goes.
And there he goes. It had to come. He is such a predictable man. Now, can he launch an attack that they can't answer?
Well, Zuller is the man taking up the chase, and immediately after that is Lance Armstrong himself. Armstrong, wearing number 1, was expecting the attack to come from Marco Pantani, as was everybody else in that group. Michael Bogard now is trying to pick up the pace, and Zuller has gone straight over the top of Pantani. Pantani now must respond, but Armstrong is riding comfortably, Phil, there in 3rd place.
Well, look at that, and Alex Zuller, what a cheek, has decided to continue the move here. Bit of a shock for Pantani, that, but he's recovered from it. And in fact, Armstrong deciding not to follow Zuller, but to follow Pantani. But all of a sudden, 3 stars of the Tour de France, with 2 wins and 2 second places in the years gone by, have left the others behind.
Well, Marco Pantani almost telephoned that through. Armstrong comes up alongside Zuller here now. He, in fact, is going to catch Pascal Hervé pretty rapidly now. He will go by him like a breath of wind. Armstrong, too, has stripped himself down. He's got rid of those arm warmers. Pantani has to accelerate out of the saddle to get onto the American's wheel. Zuller is comfortable now in 3rd position, and these are all of the remnants of the breakaway being blown away.
Well, they're coming back from the Escartin group now, including Savadelli. Here is Jan Ullrich, and Jan Ullrich, I think, has been caught here. Ullrich is trying to react, but I think we might be seeing Jan Ullrich in a bit of bother.
Well, these guys are really climbing the climb, Phil. They're accelerating away. You can see Ullrich is using a massive gear at the moment. This now looks like Peter Luttenberger, who's coming forward from the Once squad, trying to pull his man Abraham Alano back into contention. But the thing is, the way those climbers went out of the gap there, it really was quite remarkable. Ullrich can't follow the acceleration of Luttenberger, so he's not in a great day.
He's not having a great day, and he might be a bit outside his form here. But you know, that was a fine piece of riding by Lance Armstrong. He was waiting for the move and clearly had the strength there all of the time. And he's now trying to get rid of, and may have got rid of, Alex Zuller. There he is. This is shades of the road to Sestriere last year.
Certainly same weather conditions as well. Alex Zuller came across the gap there pretty rapidly, and Armstrong now is the man setting the pace and putting the Pirate in difficulty. Lance Armstrong, people criticised him last year and said, how can you become a climber? He said, well, just look at my medical records, Phil, from 1996. I weighed in then at 82 kilograms. I now weigh in at 73. That's 9 kilograms difference between then and now, and that's almost 20 pounds.
And that 20 pounds is making the difference today on the slopes of Otakam, because Marco Pantani tried it, but now he's having to follow Lance Armstrong on the climb here. Armstrong didn't start it, but he looks like he's got every idea he might like to finish it, because Armstrong now clear of some real favourites to the Tour de France and heading up towards the group, which, don't forget, when they started this attack was only 2 minutes and 20 seconds up the road.
Well, they're really flying up this climb. He looks over his shoulder occasionally just to see what the face of Marco Pantani is telling him, and it doesn't seem to be showing very much emotion at all at the moment. It's amazing to see that Armstrong is actually putting the man regarded at one time as the best climber in the world into difficulty. Zuller now has been picked up by the group of Jan Ullrich, and Ullrich, I think, Phil, will just have to ride this climb at a fairly sensible tempo. The attack now, in fact, is coming from the Lotto squad, and look at this, Armstrong accelerating once again, and there's a gap now starting to appear between Lance Armstrong and Marco Pantani, getting out of the saddle, going back into the saddle, trying to find a little bit more strength, and he's popped.
Well, I never thought I'd see the day when Lance Armstrong would blow away the man we've always referred to as the finest climber we've ever seen in the current peloton of cycling, but he started it and Armstrong has finished it, and now Lance Armstrong has written off the riders on the climb of Otakam, a shake of the head there by little Marco Pantani. Now Armstrong has got his chance here to end this terrible day in the Pyrenees right up there, having taken time off all of the principal players. He could well ride up to that group now containing Escartin.
Escartin, Jimenez and Richard Virenque. He is now doing exactly what I think he must have planned this morning, Phil. We haven't seen him move for the whole day. He's been sitting in the group. He used his teammates on the Col de l'Aubisque. He had some help from Jan Ullrich's team on the Valley Road, but he was waiting for one effort, one move to make, and he knew where it was going to be, and it was going to be on the slopes of Otakam. 71 is the number of Marco Pantani. This man a few years ago was unbeatable on a climb like this, but now he's being really put into difficulty by the man wearing number 1, Armstrong, the winner of last year.
Well, superb cycling by Lance now, because he started the day slightly ahead of Jan Ullrich, but now he's built that lead to more than a minute in the overall classification. That could be a crucial minute, but remember, this Tour de France is only in the Pyrenees for one day, but the last week of the Tour de France is in the Alps and in the centre of Provence with Mont Ventoux. It is a most difficult end to the Tour de France this year, and so there's plenty of time for those riders to recover and come back. But today now belongs, I think, to two men, to the man who's going to win the stage, Javier Ochoa, and to Lance Armstrong, who has showed us now he really is a favourite for this Tour.
Well, the gas has gone out of Marco Pantani's attempt here, because he's actually looking over his shoulder, waiting for the group of Jan Ullrich to come back to him. Lance Armstrong, Phil, was telling me just a couple of days ago that he's actually spent an awful lot of time training. He said back in 1995 and 96, when I lived in the area of Nice, when I went training, I used to avoid the mountains. I didn't want to go there. I used to prefer training on the flat. Since then, over the last couple of years, I've spent an awful lot of time training in those mountains. I actually go out and choose to train on the mountain passes in the Arrière-Pays behind Nice, and he keeps it in a low gear. He likes to use a small gear in the mountains, which is quite amazing.
Well, I've heard that Escartin had attacked up here, but I can still see him alongside Richard Virenque, so he must have just come back into the group, as this group has thinned out a little bit dramatically as well up front. But they're not getting close. 8 minutes back to Pantani now, a little bit more, because Armstrong is ahead of him. 6:52 to this group behind the man who's leading on the road, and they're not going to catch him now.
Well, Armstrong is riding an incredible time trial, an uphill time trial for him. He's eating into the advantage of Virenque, Escartin and Jimenez, and I reckon fairly shortly he will actually have them in his sights, and he will certainly launch another vicious attack. But more importantly, what he is doing at the moment, Phil, he's riding himself into the yellow jersey. The man who was yellow jersey on the road for an awful long time was Ochoa, the lone leader of the bike race. And Armstrong has still got the time to actually touch his push-to-talk button on his radio and get some information back from Johan Brunel, who will in fact be in the car behind him.
Well, Lance Armstrong looks set now to pull on the maillot jaune of race leader tonight if he can continue like this, because he has an advantage of some 7 minutes over the rider who is about to win the stage and is closing in on him rapidly. It is going to be touch and go, but the man up front well, he's looking forward to having been out in front for 175 kilometres. And Marco Pantani here now, still holding on his own, away from the others he's left behind.
175 kilometres on roads like this, in weather conditions like this. A chance here to glimpse that machine of Lance Armstrong's, a very special machine as well. It was built specifically for the mountain stages of the Tour de France, and it's around about 1.5 kilos lighter than the bike he would normally use. This is the group behind on the road, the group of Jan Ullrich. Ullrich has been put into difficulty in the mountains, a place in the past where in fact he was doing an awful lot of work leading the bike race. You can see Ullrich very happy, Phil, just to sit there in third place. In this group is Alex Zuller. Zuller tried to go out after Lance Armstrong, was unable to do so. And this now is going to be a group which will really just hope to survive and hope they don't lose too much time on the final slopes going up to the summit.
Well, Lance Armstrong currently on the road is 8 minutes and 30 seconds behind the leader on the road, and that is Ochoa. And he must finish better than 7 minutes behind him to take yellow. That's the situation as he starts to pick off all the riders now coming back. Lance Armstrong suddenly has come across Santiago Botero and gone by him as well, although Botero is trying to resist.
Well, Armstrong doesn't worry about the position of these riders at the moment. He is riding a lone race. He's focused on the job at hand. His job is to try and put as much time as possible between himself, Ullrich, Zuller and the rest. At the same time, he's also trying to catch the riders in front, the climbers who attacked him on the Col de l'Aubisque. He never responded to that attack, preparing, saving himself for this effort on the final climb of the day, where he felt confident he could pull back a breakaway even if they had 3 or 4 minutes advantage.
Well, Armstrong looking for yellow, and it never looked like that, did it, earlier today? It looked as though it was all going a bit pear-shaped, but all of a sudden Pantani started the action, and that's what Armstrong was waiting for. He has gone out to finish it now. He has got to get to the line more or better than 7 minutes and 7 seconds behind the man who's going to win the stage, and if he does, I think he will take over the race lead as well.
Well, there's the stars and stripes on his number indicating he's from the United States, and he's certainly flying the flag today. Right up alongside him there was Johan Bruneel in the team car, giving him all the information. You know, Bruneel is was a very experienced bike rider, and I think the two of them work very well together now, Phil, because Bruneel can understand the pressure of the Tour de France. Although he never actually won this bike race, he was always regarded as a contender for the top place in the overall standings.
Well, there's an awful lot of team leaders in that group there. There's Michele Bartoli's had a fabulous ride to the right of our picture here. All those riders carrying number 1 as captains of their teams, but they haven't had any answer at all to the number 1 in this year's race, the winner from last year, Armstrong. Tremendous turn of speed and strength as he now tries to cut down the gap to this rider here, who looks to be getting a little bit tired at last. And if anybody's entitled to be tired, it's this man. But I think he's done enough now to hang on to his lead.
Well, his gap is actually coming down pretty rapidly. 5:56 and 7 minutes 34 to Lance Armstrong. Armstrong has taken a minute out on the climbers on the climb, the first part of this ascent, and he's closing in on them all the time. The time gap that Armstrong needs to finish behind at the finish is 7 minutes and 7 seconds, because if he doesn't, the new leader on the road will be Javier Ochoa, the man who has led this race for 175 kilometers. The legs, Phil, of Lance Armstrong here are absolutely remarkable. They're ticking over at a very high cadence, and this is a trick I reckon he probably picked up from Miguel Indurain, because when Armstrong announced that he had cancer and he organised his ride for the Roses, Miguel Indurain actually went across on a couple of occasions to Austin and stayed with Armstrong, and they talked about time trialling and they talked about climbing. Miguel Indurain should never have been a climber. He was too big and too heavy, but he was able to turn over a small gear in the mountains, and that's exactly what Armstrong is doing now. He's keeping the gears down and keeping the tempo up.
And he's staying out of the saddle on the climb here, and he's clearly climbing faster than Ochoa now. Here's an attack by Michele Bartoli further down now, who under normal circumstances we would say has had a marvellous day out as well, but that's all been overshadowed by this late attack by Lance Armstrong, who is now heading up to the Maillot Jaune. Now, he had the Maillot Jaune for a total of 15 days in the Tour de France last year, going on to win, of course. He can't do that this time around because it's stage 10 today, but Lance Armstrong is setting himself and his team a tremendous target now, because the end, the final week of this year's Tour de France is so much harder, I feel, than last year's. But Armstrong now, I think, is going to finish within about 4.5 minutes of Ochoa, such is his tempo.
Well, it's great to see Michele Bartoli, though, out on the attack. This is another man who could have been lost to the sport of cycling after an accident at the Tour of Germany over 12 months ago. He smashed his kneecap into I don't know how many pieces, and he had to be put together, and it was bound together by wire. He was off the bike for 2 months, and in fact it took him a long time to get himself back up to some kind of form. He's actually at the moment just going by Nico Matin, another one of the great heroes of the day. Nico Matin was in that early breakaway of 3 riders, and he has still survived.
Which means that Armstrong is coming up at the back of the Escartine group here. Nico Matin has been a survivor today, hasn't he? What a hero. He even tried to kick in there and ride back to the group, and I think he's about to do it. He has had a wonderful ride today, and he's not going to get the position to show for it. But Armstrong moves on now, relentlessly cutting his way through the Tour de France today that's been shattered all over the Pyrenees, letting them all run like a great fisherman and then reeling them in one after another. Now he comes up behind Fernando Escartine. Yes, I keep getting his name right. Fernando Escartine and also Richard Virenque. There is nobody in front now who Lance Armstrong will fear in this year's Tour.
Well, Bolocchi is the Festina rider just on the left-hand side, a young rider who we'll see an awful lot more of in years to come in the Tour de France. He will be happy now, Armstrong, wearing number 1, because he's controlled the climbers on their terrain. Very sensible riding as well, Phil. Tactically, he's ridden this perfectly. He actually let them go out on the attack. He let them have their play, and as soon as he came to the final climb of the day, he rode across a 2.5-minute gap and nailed them back.
Well, I'll tell you what, Paul, Virenque doesn't know he's there yet. I doubt whether Escartine does here, number 21. Let's see the reaction when he goes past them, because it looks as though he's going to move forward. Here's good news for our man out front. He's going through now with 5 kilometers to go for Javier Ochoa. But boy, he's getting tired. I hope he hangs in there.
Well, this is the group of Jan Ullrich with Marco Pantani. Alex Zuller is the next man a little further up the road there. Zuller now all on his own, setting the tempo. Great ride by Michael Boga there, 41 for Rabobank. He's staying in contact with the other main contenders of the bike race here. No sign of Laurent Jalabert today, and again it would appear that in fact the big man from Once and from Olano, he's disappeared as well.
Yes, he has. All the others are here, and it's highlighted one problem for Jan Ullrich. He hasn't got the legs he's had in the past. It's his first time back in the Tour for 2 years. Zuller is being left here. Christophe Moreau is struggling a little bit. Must be feeling he's riding well, because he's a long... Oh, and here he goes again. Lance Armstrong is now going to break them all up, because, you know, having seen occasionally that man up front, Ochoa, he looks, Paul, as though he is hitting the wall. Lance could reach him possibly.
It'll be very hard indeed. The time gap is a long way back from Ochoa to Lance Armstrong. Armstrong's attack there to try and catch out the climbers didn't work, though. They were immediately right onto his tail. The first man to react there, number 32, was Manuel Beltran, the Mapei rider. But Armstrong now will just set the tempo on the front of this climb and hope that he can reduce the deficit that he has on Ochoa, the lone leader on the road, the only man in front of this group right now.
And this is Richard Virenque. Armstrong is just punching those pedals. Little Beltran here is suffering like he's never suffered in his life before, number 32, and he's hanging on. Escartine and Heras are hanging on as Armstrong kicks again, and this time I don't think they'll answer him.
This is unbelievable. He's got serious power going on here, Lance Armstrong. He's not actually attacked them now, Phil. He's just putting the hammer down, looking over his shoulder to see what sort of difficulty he's putting them into. He's controlled, and he's absolutely decided on doing the job in hand. He's a very concerned rider right now, because he wants to try and blow the climbers away and give himself even more of an advantage before we go up to the Mont Ventoux, a climb that he himself is always scared of. He was actually in difficulty there in the Tour, the Dauphiné Libéré earlier on this year, and now he wants to try and make sure he's got a big buffer.
Well, looking down at Bolocchi and Bartoli there, we've gone further back down the mountain to the Ullrich-Zuller group. It looks as though the tempo by Zuller is gradually bringing Bartoli and Bolocchi back into this group. but Armstrong has continued the pressure on the front.
Well, in fact, Race Radio telling us Armstrong has continued alone, which means he's now managed to drop Virenque, Jimenez and Escartin. This is the man who leads the Festina squad, Christophe Moreau and Michele Bartoli, but Armstrong is the man doing all of the danger in the damage, I should say, in this year's Tour de France. The hammer is down. He really is flying up the mountain, Phil.
It reminds me of when we last came up Oterkamp, Paul, with Bjarne Riis doing this.
Absolutely. Armstrong now knows that he can blow everybody away. He's only got one thing to do now, and that's to try and reduce the deficit on Ochoa. I don't think that Spanish climber is going to be caught today, because he really deserves to win the bike race. These are the climbers. There in front is Lance Armstrong riding away from them. They are just trying to survive. They are absolutely suffering to stay in his slipstream.
Well, you know, he's destroyed these guys. They're in all sorts of trouble. Virenque is going up forward now with Massabo. 4 kilometres for the little man at the front, but that was a long 5th kilometre. It seems to have taken about 3 minutes or so to get up to the 4 kilometre banner, but he's still there. It gets a little bit easier and then it kicks again.
A little bit easier, that's only relatively speaking,
Of
because
course.
this is a very difficult climb. He's been climbing now, Phil, for 8.5 kilometres, just hoping to survive. He started the climb with a 10.5 minute advantage, and the last time check we got was pretty close to just 6 minutes on this man Armstrong. Armstrong wearing number 1, just looking over his shoulder. He's very controlled at the moment, Phil. He's just keeping an eye on what sort of damage he's doing to the rest. The man coming across here at the moment, in fact, is Mancebo, the small Spanish climber. In fact, it isn't Mancebo, it's Jimenez who's made the recovery.
It's Jimenez who looks to be coming best of the rest here. He has got good form in the mountains, and he sprinted back up to Lance Armstrong. He's the only one that's been able to achieve that today. Armstrong looking over his shoulder and seeing who's coming, and he's going for him again. That's the time to hit the man before he can settle.
Well, he really is playing with everybody today, but Jimenez has ridden back sensibly. He's ridden himself back to the tail wheel of Lance Armstrong as they go under 5 kilometres to go. You know, there's only 1.5 kilometres between them. Well, this could be a big turn up for the books. We've got to keep our fingers crossed now for Ochoa, because he really does deserve to win this bike race. 5 kilometres for the other guys on the road.
Well, it was 10.5 minutes at the start of this climb, and now it is just under 5 minutes. Armstrong to the leader.
Armstrong now quite content to set the tempo at the front. He won't ask for any help, I don't think, for Jose Maria Jimenez. He switched across the road just to have a look at the face of the Spanish rider, and a quick glimpse there of the kind of gears that are being used. This is the man that was regarded as the king of the mountains, the fastest man on all of the ascents, and today, Phil, he's been put into serious difficulty. He showed flashes of his former glory in the Tour of Italy recently this year, but he hasn't got it here on the slopes of Oterkamp, and neither has Jan Ullrich.
No, you can't take time out in big chunks like Ullrich and Pantani have done over the past year and expect to come back and win a race like the Tour de France, because that's also Paulo Nico Matan coming by. Another beaten man here in Alex Zuller. I've never seen so many tired big names in the Tour de France for years. These fellows have all tried and have been destroyed. Armstrong let them all do it and then has ridden them off.
Well, this is now Alex Zuller just trying to keep as much of his advantage as possible over the others, but he's really just surviving here on the slopes of Oterkamp. He's just ridden himself up to the back wheel of Christophe Moreau, who really is riding a fantastic bike race, because he's not one of the names we would have given at the start of the day of a man who would be up with a chance of riding high in the overall standings at the Tour and riding high in the mountains either.
Well, this is Jimenez here. Looks a little bit like Miguel Indurain as he comes up behind Lance Armstrong. Armstrong pedals that low gear as he always does. Has a good look at the board there and works out whether he can catch this man, I think, because this rider now will be at 3 kilometres from the summit, the end of a long day, and I think he now knows that.
Oh, it hurts. He's really going slow. I think he has hit the wall there, Phil.
I think he has.
Because he's having a real hard time digging those pedals over the top. He has obviously suffered today. 175 kilometres at the front of the bike race, and a lot of it in weather conditions like this. Armstrong now 4 minutes 25 seconds. It could all go down to the very last kilometre, because Armstrong and Jimenez here are flying up this mountain.
What an amazing Tour de France. Yesterday on a flat road, the 4 leaders were given the same time as the finishing bunch behind behind them. Then we had Jens Voigt and Eric Decker past 400 metres from the line the other day. And now, Paul, it could all happen again here to Ochoa.
Well, there's Marco Pantani in the pink of the Mercatoni Uno squad. In front of him on the road is Michael Bogard, and just a little way in front of him is Jan Ulrich. But Armstrong here is showing that he is a climber. He'd actually said, just wait until we get to the mountains if you think I can't climb hills, and he's certainly proving today that he is, and now one of the greatest climbers in the sport, because he's lost a lot of weight because of that illness of his which nearly took his life, but he has managed to retain almost all of his strength.
Well, the great Eddie Merckx is commentating for Belgian television here today. He's just come on to the race for day one for him. This is the way he used to win his races. He just destroyed the opposition one-on-one, and he won the Tour de France 5 times. And there'll be very few people now that won't tell you that Lance Armstrong's going to win it for the second time. Today, for sure, he'll pull on the leader's yellow jersey.
There's still an awful lot of climbing to go. There's the Mont Ventoux and then 3 very hard days in the Alpine passes. But the man who certainly is turning out to be the leader of the Banesto squad is not Alex Zuller, it's Jose Maria Jimenez. This man rode alongside Miguel Indurain for a couple of years when Miguel was at the top of the ladder, and he certainly learned exactly how to handle the pressure of being at the top of the overall standings here. This is Escartin. He really is a broken man at the moment, Phil. He's all over his machine just trying to survive. He went out on the attack on the Col de l'Aubisque. They were a long time in front of Armstrong's group, at one time 3.5 minutes ahead of the American, and now he's well behind him on the road.
Well, in fact, Ochoa has lost 1 minute of his lead in 500 metres. So there is every chance Armstrong will contact before the finish.
Well, that is unbelievable. That young man at the front, Javier Ochoa, was looking so good at the bottom of the climb, Phil, but on a day like this you always get very strange performances, and the only thing I can believe is that he's hit the wall. He's come under he's hit glucose exhaustion. He's not able to keep the power in his legs anymore, and it's too late to take on board any food. Even if you've got a high energy drink, it won't get into the system quick enough to save him from the onslaught and the movement forward by Lance Armstrong. You see, he's got no power at all left in those legs. He's all over his machine. The top part of his body is just trying to tick it by, and there's confirmation of what you've just told us. 3:36 to Armstrong.
It is possible this poor chap here is going to not win the stage, but let's hope they cheer him on, because he deserves it today. There have been 2 heroes, that's for sure, but we wouldn't want to see now Ochoa lose this stage. Armstrong has been absolutely unbelievable on the climb of Hautecam. And let's not forget, Paul, he didn't start the action either.
He didn't start the action. He responded to the action, the reaction and the attack by Marco Pantani. The chase was taken up initially by Alex Zuller, and Armstrong matched the move. And once he saw the other 2 guys didn't have the pressure or the go in their legs, he decided to go over the top. The crowd are now pushing this man forward. They're willing him to the finish. They've been watching and listening on radios, Phil, at the side of the road. They've known exactly what this man has done. He held 17 minutes advantage at one stage, and now he's losing it unbelievably quickly, almost a minute every kilometre.
Well, he's taken 37 seconds away from Escartin and Veronk, Lance Armstrong, and that's not a lot, but it's all the right way for him. But this man here is now under the 2 kilometres to go. Now there's the top, you can see the cars. It's still a little lump to climb yet for this man at 2 to go, but at least he'll take a lot of encouragement now. They're the Basque flags of his country, and he's being cheered all the way now to the summit.
Well, Armstrong is less than 1 kilometre behind him on the road at the moment, but at this pace it's taking around about 2.5 minutes to ride a kilometre. You can see this man, he knows now what's happening behind him. He's digging deep, he's out of the saddle, he's trying to find a little bit of energy from somewhere in his body, but he's not sure where it's going to come from. Jimenez is having a hard time though, Phil, staying on the wheel of Armstrong. 3 minutes is the advantage for Ochoa, and 6 minutes back to Marco Pantani.
But 2:57, Paul, that's another half minute just taken off by Lance Armstrong here, who's continuing to ride away. Well, I said earlier, and I was partly joking, it was a tailwind finish for Ochoa. It might be the only thing that keeps him away now.
It's the only thing that might save him. This has been a dramatic climb up here at Hautacam, and Armstrong accelerating once again, and I don't think Jose Maria Jimenez has got anything left now to respond to the final acceleration of the American, who last year rose from the ashes really after that cancer nearly took his life. He is now he's now building up on the victory of last year and looking really to blow away every one of his contenders on the road here of Hautacam.
He is looking ahead now to see if he can spot the lone leader on the slopes of Hautacam. The roads become long and straight. Shortly he might see him as he comes round the bend. Look at the massive crowd up here now. Many of them are Spanish people. They've just shed this Spanish rider because Armstrong has ridden away for the US. As the Spanish rider Jimenez has lost contact, he might come back. He's still got some fight in those legs.
Well, he's a great bike rider. You see him nudging it up a gear there. He's going to dig deep. He wants to stay with Armstrong. He knows this too will drag him up in the overall rankings. But Armstrong is riding his own race now. He's riding a man against man with the man who is at the front of the race at the moment, and that is Javier Ochoa from Kelme. But Armstrong still, Phil, is using a very small gear, just ticking those pedals over, keeping his cadence up high, which is really quite remarkable. This is like the climbers of old. He really is ticking it over at 80 or 90 RPM at the moment. He is now under 2 kilometers to go to the finish. He and Ochoa in the same kilometer on this climb.
I reckon they're separated by 800 meters now. As Armstrong started this climb, 10 minutes behind him, and 800 meters is all that remains as we head up towards the red kite.
Well, this is it, 2 minutes and 15 seconds. He has to pull back 1 minute on each kilometre of this final ascent of the climb here to pull back this man, Ochoa. The crowd, Phil, look at them, they're going mad, they're going crazy. They really want this guy to win. They love and respect the bravery of this man to go out on the attack 175 kilometres from the finish in conditions that really have been grotesque.
Oh, it's going to be oh so close now. I don't think he's under the kilometre, but into the barriers, and that will help now. But Armstrong still looking there to hunt down the last man who survives ahead of him in the Tour de France. He knows now the yellow jersey goes to his hotel tonight and to his room as we come to the 1 kilometre to go for the man who has been the outright hero of the day, although that now is highly debatable.
I think he just might do it. He's got 1,000 metres to go once he goes under that bridge, the red kite, the flamme rouge in international cycling. Every bike rider will be looking for it, but they look for it more than on any other stage in the mountains because they know then that relief is only just around the corner. But Armstrong is around about 600 metres behind this guy at the moment, and a big sprint to the line could change it completely. It is Ochoa, Armstrong. The difference in the speed is remarkable.
Well, Armstrong is just trying to finish this off with a sprint finish here, and that might be what exactly it will be. We're 900 metres from the finish with the race leader, and Armstrong is racing up towards the 1,000 metres to go. Where he's found this strength from, I don't know. He has torn the field apart here. The crowd here cheering him on, but no, not with quite the same enthusiasm, because they want that Spanish rider to win.
They want him to win. They want him to get over the line in first position. A lot of Basque flags out here as well, Phil. We're only just over the border from Spain, and they've all turned out in their numbers to see him. There's the American flag for Armstrong, 1 minute and 39 seconds. He's ripping into that advantage that Ochoa has. I don't think he's going to do it by the line, but it's going to be very, very close. They should be in the same straight.
They will be. There is the kilometre across the road now. In the climb of Hautacam, Lance Armstrong has taken 9 whole minutes off the leader, and it'll be probably 9.5 minutes by the line. Here he is now, living in a world of his own and suffering like he never has in his life. And will the top of Hautacam please come as soon as possible?
Well, if he looks across to the right-hand side, he'll see all the television trucks waiting for him there, but he hasn't even got to the 500 metres to go banner yet. So Armstrong is just 500 metres behind him, and a long way down the slopes are Ulrich, Zuller and Marco Pantani. They are losing big time on the first big mountain stage of this year's Tour.
He's now scoring over everybody here. And this rider has done the ride of his life. He's never won a pro race in his career. What a way to start after a brilliant escape of 175 kilometres.
Well, it was 1 minute and 23 seconds under the final kilometre there for Lance Armstrong. If in fact Ochoa looks back down the straight there, he will be able to see Armstrong boring down upon him. Very shortly, 1:14, it's gone down even more. This man has got to find a bit more strength, but I think, Phil, he has done it. He has survived. He had 17 minutes at one stage. He had 10 minutes at the bottom of this climb. It doesn't really matter how much is left now, because I think he's going to get the win.
Never has the voice of Daniel Manjas, the speaker of the Tour de France, sounded so good, because he knows now he's coming up to the line. This has been a superb ride. He could never have thought when he broke away and joined Jackie Giron on the flat roads outside Dax that it would lead to victory at the finishing line at Otakam. And at 175 kilometres later, he is turning into the home straight, while Lance Armstrong of the United States is continuing to close in at an alarming rate.
Well, he's done it, Phil. He's now inside the barriers. He's now inside the signs that are ticking off the meters to go. Just 200 meters to go for him now, and the straight will be in sight.
As he comes up the barriers now, the headlights are on, but miraculously the crowd has lifted. He gets the victory, Javier Ochoa, and this is a superb victory today in the Tour de France. 6 hours plus in the saddle, but watch the back of your screen there, because here he comes. Lance Armstrong, as the clock ticks down, is racing to the yellow jersey of the Tour de France. He was the first man last year to wear it and became the second and only man after that. Today he'll be the fourth man. Is he the last one in this year's Tour? Time will tell. But Armstrong today has destroyed the field in the Tour de France. The minutes are ticking off once he hits the line. A determined and ultimate impression of Lance Armstrong today as he comes up to the line. And look at that time gap. 10 minutes 35 at the bottom, 41 seconds at the top.
Absolutely remarkable. This man put in an incredible form there. He really ripped away from everybody, and all the serious contenders now had better go back to the drawing board and think about their plans. This man was the man who stayed with him for the longest possible time, though, Phil, and this could be the man who we'll see climbing higher up the rankings as we go into the Alps. Jose Maria Jimenez, a former teammate of Miguel Indurain. He came here as the teammate of Alex Zuller, but I think by tonight he will be the leader of Banesto. He has conceded 1 minute and 12 seconds.
A great result for Jimenez that. He's climbed superbly here as the cloud, almost by chance, they just crossed the line. The cloud has appeared from nowhere to flood over the top of Otakam. Here is that little select group that was in fact with Richard Virenque, Heras and Fernand Escartin, and this rider now is Beltran, making his way up to the line. The two Kelme boys, well, they've got the team today, that's for sure.
They certainly have. What a great ride. Great ride by Kelme, Phil, but Richard Virenque has also put in a pretty fine performance here as well. He's come past Beltran over the top here. He's not going to get the king of the mountains today. That will certainly go to the man who took the stage. But fourth over the line, Richard Virenque, just ahead of Beltran.
So here's a look now at the damage which was done today. Fernando Escartin finishing 6th, Roberto Heras 7th, and Christophe Moreau in 8th place. Alex Zuller lost 3 minutes 47 seconds. Jan Ullrich, unlucky 13th, lost over 4 minutes. Michael Bogert over 5, and Marco Pantani, who started the attacking, he trailed in almost 6 minutes back. Of others, Abraham Olana was 23rd, but indeed a good ride by David Miller. He should be pleased with his finish of 36th. And here he is now speaking to Gary Imlach.
And then I was in a world of pain coming up Otakam there. It was just make the hurting stop kind of thing. It was just seeing the panos like 8Ks, 7Ks, and I was just banging my head against the wall. So, I mean, I did okay. I'm happy with what I did. I think it puts me second best young rider. So.
Yeah, cleared the likes of Bobby Julich by nearly 2 minutes, Tyler Hamilton by over a minute. You must be pleased.
Oh yeah, no, I'm pleased. It hurts so much now. It just gives me the fear for the Alpine stages. It's going to be horrible. It's just going to get worse from here on in. So.
A first podium finish tonight for Javier Ochoa, and what a ride he did today. But overall, it's all changed as Lance Armstrong claims the yellow jersey now, and look at the time gaps. Jan Ullrich is second, but over 4 minutes back. Ochoa is in the frame now in 8th. Of the other big names, many of them are down. 11th now for Richard Virenque, 12th for Abraham Olano, 13th for Alex Zuller, but the big time gaps are there. And Marco Pantani, well, he's a long way back too, but he has come up from 84th overall. David Miller, a great ride really. He is still well up in the overall classification. This is his first Tour, remember, 32nd at 12 minutes 34 seconds. In yellow tonight, Lance Armstrong, a real day of giant killing for him. And when he came down from the podium, he spoke to Paul Sherry.
Lance, were you a little worried on the Col de l'Aubisque when you lost most of your teammates?
A little worried. I was very worried. What camera are we looking at? That one there. Yeah, I was worried. I considered trying to go across, but you know, one of the first times in my career I had true patience.
You wanted to win the stage today, obviously, but what about a word for the guy who hung on to win?
Yeah, I had no desire to win the stage. No. My ambition was to put time on my rivals, and you know, if that meant getting 10th, that was okay, you know. And the kid who won, I mean, it did chapeau. I mean, it was away all day, and it was obviously strong. It's a hard climb, and to stay away, you have to be a strong man. A lot of Spanish people on the climb. I think they encouraged him some.
And just to complete the picture, Eric Zabel in the green jersey tonight bringing home the autobus. And in this group, at the former yellow jersey of the Tour, Alberto Elli. They finished almost 32 minutes back, but inside the time limit, so they get to race again tomorrow. The race goes on, and it continues now with stage 11 from Bagnères to Revel. And we're in an area now that just simply loves the Tour de France, as it courses its way past, of course, the famous sunflower fields, which abound down here, the tournesols, which mean they always turn towards the sun. Gary Imlach is among them.
The man Lance Armstrong defers to as the best climber in the world lost over 5 minutes to him yesterday on the Tour's first mountain stage. But then, considering the amount of time Marco Pantani's lost over the last year, maybe it's less remarkable that he's behind in the race than that he's in the race at all.
E io per vincere non ho bisogno del doping, ma ho bisogno delle salite.
Oh, he's done it again! He's done it again!
2 years ago, Marco Pantani was at the height of a career built on it. He'd exploded the modern myth that climbers can't win the major tours by winning two. First the Giro d'Italia, then the Tour de France.
A clear winner.
Then last year, on the brink of repeating his Giro win, he failed a blood test and began a descent which threatened to develop into terminal decline. As Pantani's medical records became evidence in various investigations into doping in Italian sport, a series of dates for his return to racing came and went.
L'obiettivo è quello di esserci al 100% e puntare a vincere.
That was Pantani sounding optimistic about his chances for the World Championships last October. But 11 months on from the Giro blood test, his public appearance total read 3 ongoing court cases and 2 days competitive racing. The speculation shifted from when he'd return to whether.
Quando tornerà a correre, se lo può dire? Ma non lo so, quando il mio stato d'animo sarà ottimale. Questione di giorni, di settimane o di mesi? Non faccio promesse.
Finally, in a classic piece of Italian melodrama, he appeared before the Pope at the pre-race celebrations for this year's Giro and confirmed he'd be resuming his career where he'd left off.
Credo che sia una prova difficile perché per uno abituato a fare la corsa, rimanere di dietro sicuramente soffrirò sotto il profilo psicologico.
On the Giro's first mountain stage, Pantani lost nearly 7 minutes. But 10 days later, he was riding at the front over the Col d'Izoard, helping his teammate Stefano Garzelli, then helping himself to second place in Briançon. When Garzelli won the race overall, he dedicated his victory to Pantani. So, on the evidence of the Giro, perhaps we should all hold off a bit on the Pantani obituaries. He lost less time to Lance Armstrong in the Tour's first mountain stage than he did to Francesco Casagrande on the corresponding day in Italy. And coincidentally, the terrain he relaunched himself on in the Giro over the Izoard to Briançon is coming up on this race in 4 days' time.
Well, Pantani still playing a waiting game as we now are just 12 kilometres from the finish here. The red number on the back of Eric Decker, which means he's the most aggressive rider so far. Nobody can doubt that. And with him today on the attack, Santiago Botero. And when they get to the finish, Decker beats Botero after a break, Paul, of 204 kilometres.
Absolutely remarkable. A great ride there by that man, Eric Decker. A back seat in the mountains, and in this group coming to the line now is David Miller there in second position, the man who wore the first yellow jersey in this Tour de France. He's not going to get third place across the line though, Phil. That's going to go to Rick Brugger of Lotto, but a great challenge there coming from David Miller.
And Miller trying desperately to get the best of this little group here, but it is Verbrugge who comes up on the right, and Eric Zabel behind is leading out the sprint here for best of the rest.
Well, Eric Zabel on the right-hand side, Phil, now wearing the green jersey, but Armstrong is still the leader after 11 stages, 4 minutes and 14 seconds ahead of Jan Ullrich. Christophe Moreau is third, 5:10 behind. We have had a remarkable first attempt into the mountains, but look at the gaps already. Abraham Olano, 7 minutes behind. Marco Pantani, 24th, 10 minutes 34 back. But the king of the mountains is Javier Ochoa. Leads his own teammate there, Santiago Botero. This man now looking seriously good as the challenger for the green jersey for the points competition, ahead of Marcel Wust and Tom Steels, the early leaders.
All right, now it's time to preview tomorrow's stage, which should be a classic, because there aren't many mountains that riders talk about with genuine fear. But as Paul Sherwin reports, Mont Ventoux is one of them.
Ventoux gives me the fear, because it's my nemesis, Ventoux.
It's like the moon. There's nothing there. There's no grass. It's just rock. Weird.
Well, it's a mythical place, I think.
It doesn't like me. I don't know.
And this is it, the Mont Ventoux today. It's 1 degree Celsius, there's 30 meters of visibility, and as you can see, a few snow flurries in the air as well. These weather conditions will add to the fear that runs through every rider's mind when he thinks about the Mont Ventoux. But even if it does clear overnight, this is still going to be the scene of an epic battle. The Tour de France has been over here many times, but it's only finished at the top of this mountain on 5 occasions, and every winner here has been a cycling hero. Charlie Gall was the first man to win here in 1958. Not only did he win the stage, he went on to win the Tour. The next great name to conquer the Giant of Provence was France's hero, Raymond Poulidor. In 1965, he rode to a dramatic stage victory at the summit. 5 years later, in 1970, the greatest cyclist of all time, Eddy Merckx, raced up the mountain to victory in the yellow jersey. In 1972, a young Frenchman, Bernard Thévenet, won at the summit of the climb. 3 years later, he would win the Tour. The race waited 15 years before it returned to the barren slopes, and France's Jean-François Bernard time-trialled to victory, a victory that brought him the yellow jersey. Another name will be added to that illustrious list tomorrow. I've ridden this mountain, I can still remember the anxiety the night before and the thoughts that this beast conjures up in your mind, and I know that that's still the same for the riders of this year's Tour de France.
I think that it's fair to say the Ventoux is the hardest race in the entire Tour. It's 19 kilometers at close to 10%. It's an incredibly hard climb, and so and one that I don't know if I have a very good relationship with that mountain, and so I'll be happy when it's past us.
Racing up there, I'm convinced it's one of the hardest climbs simply because it never changes. It's just unrelenting, and I think if it's hot there, it's just hell, because it opens up and you see the last 5 Ks. And if you're not feeling good, you can just see it going up and up and up for 4 or 5 kilometers in front of you, and it honestly is horrific.
It's a place where I think everybody who loves cycling or is a fan of cycling or follows the sport should go, because it's unlike anything anywhere else. It's 1,900 meters at the top, but it's not like any other 1,900 meters anywhere else. I mean, 1,900 meters on the Izoard, you can breathe. The top of the Ventoux, you cannot breathe. At least I can't.
Apart from the excitement of the bike race, there's always a sad moment when the Tour de France visits the Mont Ventoux, because it was here on the slopes of this mountain in 1967 that Tom Simpson gave up his life pursuing the sport that he loved. On that day, it was 35 degrees Celsius, and as Simpson collapsed from his bike, he was helped to the side of the road by the British team. Here, 2 kilometres to go to the summit, is the memorial to Simpson, the first British rider ever to wear the yellow jersey at the Tour de France. Tomorrow, everybody will remember the history of this strange and mythical place.
Well, it's an important day for Lance Armstrong and a real test for all 160 riders as they come away from Carpentras this morning in warm sunshine. But they'll do well to remember they are many thousands of feet below the finishing line today. Armstrong are looking relaxed and seemingly not too worried about what the day will bring. Well, it's already brought an early surprise for David Miller and the white jersey of Francisco Manthabo. They were both involved in a pile-up very early on of 25 riders, all recovered and rejoined the field within a few kilometres. And there's a breakaway got away at 45 kilometres. There are 9 riders at the moment. The latest check we had, Paul, was 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
Well, these riders went clear over the first major climb of the day, the Col de Mour, and it was really started by Christophe Agneluto. At the moment, as you say, they have 4 minutes and 20 seconds advantage, and all of the work in the main field is being done by Lance Armstrong's US Postal Service team. But we're still looking at around about 60 kilometres to go to the finish line.
And what are 60 kilometres to? The rider with his hand up there is Nico Martin, who had a great ride through the Pyrenees, and he's gone out on an early attack again. The other members of the breakaway, Jose Luis Arrieta of Banesto, Christophe Agneluto was a stage winner earlier last week for AG2R, Vincenti Garcia Acosta, he's a Banesto rider. The man who was on the attack going into Revel the other day before the rest day, Santiago Botero, when he finished second to Deca. Nicolas Jalabert, the brother of Laurent, Alexander Vinokourov and Andrea Kivilev. And the other man making up the breakaway is the climber from the Polti team, Pascal Hervé. And looking down now on the leader of the Tour after that wonderful ride on Monday to Hautacam in the Pyrenees, Lance Armstrong, his team looking after him. They got away, in fact, to a very quick start today. The peloton split up into probably 5 or 6 groups before it came together again. And since then, they have more or less controlled the pack into nice one unit, Paul, with just those 9 men away.
One of the early attacks actually featured Jan Ullrich, who feels a lot better now that the sunshine has come, and certainly admits that he wants to try and do what he can over the next mountainous stages to try and pull back some time on Lance Armstrong. He doesn't want to lay down arms and let Armstrong ride up to Paris without any form of attack. And a lot of people think basically Lance Armstrong has won the Tour de France so far, but listening to people like Richard Virenque and Jan Ullrich, I think this race is far from over. Well, Lance Armstrong is right to be worried about this mountain, Phil, because I reckon it probably is the toughest mountain in this year's Tour de France. It's 21 kilometres of ascent, and the difference between the top and the bottom is 1,600 metres. That's over 5,400 feet of climbing, which is pretty difficult. And the toughest part is the middle section of the climb, which averages out at 10%. But in some of the corners, they really are remarkable. In fact, I would say the percentage in 1 or 2 of the corners is pretty close to 15%.
Vicious is the word, and sadly this was the climb back in July 1967 when it was stage 13 that Tom Simpson lost his life just over a kilometre from the summit. He was taken off the mountain by helicopter and sadly died on his way to hospital in Carpentras. And so now the riders making their way once more to Mont Ventoux. It's a climb which doesn't see the Tour de France too often. The last time we had a time trial finish up here, and that was won by Jean-Francois Bernard, the same year that Stephen Roach in 1987 went on to become Ireland's first winner of the Tour de France. There's the latest check, 4 minutes 45 being shown there to the man on the front of the bunch there, and that was Christophe Agneluto. There he is. He had a stage win on his belt the other week, the first one for the French for 2 years, in fact, and the pace being set now by his teammate Andrei Kivilev. Andrei Kivilev, by the way, Paul, he's a Kazakhstan rider, and that's his old international teammate with him today, Alexander Vinokourov, riding on a rival team now.
Well, those riders, most of those riders from the Kazakhstan team actually turned professional for some of the top teams on the international circuit. And Kivilev himself is a very aggressive bike rider, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more of him as he develops into being a good pro. But AG2R, the French team, have done a very good job, Phil, getting 2 riders into this breakaway group. And in fact, the gap now increasing to 4 minutes and 50 seconds. But all of that can get blown away on the slopes of this mountain, because we're looking at climbing the Mont Ventoux for around about an hour to an hour and a quarter.
Yeah, and I think also that breakaway went very early, and I thought for a moment it was going to go up into our double figures like it has done the previous days. But I think Lance Armstrong, Paul, has told his American postal team, and here they are now, to lift the tempo a bit and not allow it so much leeway today.
Well, I think he's probably planning something in the back of his mind too. He obviously knows the history of this mountain, and he knows it has always been the scene of some dramatic battles. And Armstrong, I feel quite certain, would like to write his name into the history books. He did last year by winning the Tour de France in what was the fastest ever edition of the Tour de France, and certainly he'll be looking today to do something special on the slopes of this mountain, despite the fact that before the start and over the first week of the Tour, he's actually claimed to be wary and scared of this mountain.
Well, with good reason, I think. I've never known such strong winds blow on Mont Ventoux. We had snow flurries across it yesterday, the riders having their rest day down at the bottom in Carpentras. But one or two of them driving up in the car to get a look at it firsthand, and it is a daunting prospect to race up Mont Ventoux. And in fact, the day before yesterday, 7,500 cyclists, all riding what they call the stage of the Tour, weren't allowed up. They just allowed a couple of thousand up, and the police closed the road, in fact, because winds were gusting too much to get the riders up the climb. So they turned them away halfway up the climb. Of course, the riders were very disappointed, but it was the common sense thing to do for sure.
It was absolutely amazing up here yesterday. I came up and had a look at the place, and in fact you couldn't see very much more than 50 yards, and there were awfully very heavy squalls of snow coming across the route, and I would think most of these guys are fairly happy today with the weather conditions, Phil, despite the fact that it is very windy and cold up here. At least they'll get a chance to see just exactly where they're going to.
Yes, indeed. This is the 26th place rider overall, Vinokourov here, having a chat with his team car. He is 11 minutes and 39 seconds behind Lance Armstrong. He's got 5 minutes of that back at the moment in this little group. There is the man in the Kelme jersey, Santiago Botero, who rode so well with Decker. A breakaway of an awful long breakaway of 129 miles it was, and that was almost 202 kilometers. So an incredible long breakaway the other day into Revel. There's the main peloton of the Tour de France. Nobody behind the race at the moment, apart from those, of course, who have now abandoned, and there's 7 of them gone.
Well, in fact, Race Radio telling us there's been a major change at the front end of the main field. It's the Banesto squad coming forward, and I'm sure that is all to do with the fact that Santiago Botero is in that group. They're very, very worried about this man, Phil. He's an excellent climber. Currently, he's 30th in the overall standings, 12 minutes and 15 seconds behind. But they don't want to allow him to get to the foot of the climb with a 5 or 6 minute advantage.
Well, they're in a better position to at least control him this time, Paul, because the Banesto team have got 2 riders in that breakaway, and it looks, even though they have 2 riders up there, they're still prepared to chase them down with this team here, which I find very strange tactics indeed.
Well, for them, they are very worried about him. The fact that he is an excellent climber. They realise that he can threaten the positions of their men in the overall standings, and that's Alex Zuller and Jose Maria Jimenez, which is why they've come forward just to help somewhat in the chase. They're not going to chase as hard as they can, but what they will do is make sure that that group doesn't get too big an advantage before the bottom of the climb.
On this climb here of the Col de Notre Dame, the peloton reporting dropping Olivier Perraudot, one of the Bonjour team, first Tour de France for him, and struggling on this climb now. Well, if he struggles on this climb, Paul, he's going to be in terrible straits on the climb of Mont Ventoux. Here now we're looking back at the leading group. Just remind of all these names again. Nico Matin is the rider sitting at the back. Just ahead of him is Nicolas Jalabert. The man in the green is Santiago Botero. The other members of this breakaway are the Banesto riders, Jose Luis Arrieta and Vincenti Garcia Acosta. For AG2R, you've got Christophe Agneluto and Andrei Kivalev. The Telecom boys have got Alexander Vinokourov, and the Polti rider team has Pascal Hervé. That's the composition of this breakaway. Very active start today. There was also a nasty crash at around 25 kilometers today. Some 25 riders piled up, and in that group was the white jersey of Francisco Mansabe, and the man who's closest to him in that young riders competition, David Miller. So I suspect they were riding very close to each other when the pile-up occurred.
I'd like to find out just exactly how David Miller is doing, because we were hearing on Race Radio, in fact, he'd gone back to the doctor's car on several occasions to receive attention. He is up and riding again and in the main field at the moment, but I wonder just how badly he was injured in that crash, which seemed to be quite a hard one. Looking at the main field now, Phil, you can see they're starting to stretch out on the slopes of this climb, so the pressure coming on really at the front because of the addition to the working at the front of the Banesto squad. And Armstrong, for the moment, resplendent in that yellow jersey, is looking very comfortable, and a great chance to see the pedaling action of him, because he does use a very small gear compared to most of the other riders in this tour.
Yes, noticeably so indeed. But I'm just looking at these riders, Paul, that they're like they're riding the Tour de France in the summer, and that certainly isn't what it is up on top of the mountain. I'm wondering if they haven't got enough clothing on today.
Well, they won't have to worry too much, because once they start riding this mountain, they will certainly warm up quite a lot. I've ridden up the Mont Ventoux before, and in the month of March during the Paris-Nice race, and it has been in very cold weather conditions at the time as well. And because of the pressure of just trying to get your body up this mountain, I don't think they'll feel the cold too much. And in fact, talking to one or two riders, Phil, they are not very worried really about the fact that it is cold. This man in the front here has actually stopped at the side of the road. He's one of the Banesto riders. He's obviously received the word from the team management to drop back. Such is the worry of having the presence of Santiago Botero, the Kelme rider, in this leading group.
Well, that's absolutely amazing. In fact, he took advantage there of time out on the side of the road, and he's waiting now for the race to come up. In fact, Jose Luis Arrieta it was, and the other Banesto rider has been told to stop working in the breakaway and sit at the back, and this will be Vicente Garcia da Costa. Now, that's interesting tactics, Paul. The rider is not allowed to turn round and go back towards the race. It is totally forbidden for anybody to go towards the direction of the race, so he can either ride along slowly or indeed stop and wait, but he's not allowed to go back towards the race.
Well, that's a lot of tactics, and all these tactics now, Phil, coming into the sport of cycling really because of the improvement of radio communication. All of these riders now can communicate with the team management, and they know just exactly what tactics the team manager wants. That is where they're heading to today. That is the summit of the climb they call the Géant de Provence, the Giant of Provence, the Mont Ventoux. 1,900 meters at the summit, and it's an awful long climb to get there.
So we're looking down at the 8 leaders of today's stage of the Tour de France, and in case you've just joined us, I'll give you the leaders again here. Christophe Agneluto, Vicente Garcia Acosta, Santiago Botero, Nicolas Jalabert, Alexander Vinokourov, Andrei Kivilev, Nico Matin and Pascal Hervé. And the best placed in this breakaway is Matin, 21st at the start this morning, 9 minutes and 51 seconds behind Lance Armstrong. There he is now, 125. And in many ways, Paul, Matin has been the surprise of this tour.
Well, he really has, because he spends an awful lot of his time, Phil, in the shadow of Frank van den Broeke. He's actually regarded as the PR man for Frank van den Broeke, and he says he gets a bit upset because journalists spend the majority of their time phoning him because it's so difficult to speak to the Belgian star. Nico Matin gets 10 to 15 telephone calls a day, and he reckons the first 30 seconds are, hello, Nico, how's the form going? That's very nice. And how is Frank van den Broeke? What's van den Broeke doing now? What's he going to do? Where's he going to race? And today I think he's climbing into his own personality after that long breakaway situation. I really think he did a great ride to survive in a situation like that, because he's not one of the great climbers. He's a very strong worker for the Cofidis team, especially in the one-day classics. And here he's got the courage to go out in a breakaway situation, because, you know, when you know that the Mont Ventoux is coming up at the end, you always want to hold back a little bit of energy, but these 8 guys have certainly not done that at all. They want to get to the foot of the climb with as much of an advantage as possible.
And they've been in the front now for about 75 kilometres and working pretty hard, because in fact they've just gone clear by an extra 5 seconds there. It's 3 minutes 55 now, so it looks as though the field behind have just about levelled out on them, and they'll stop bringing them back. Interesting there, Paul, you mentioned Frank van den Broeke, the rider who abandoned the other day. He said he had strained knee ligaments, but frankly very few people believe that. It's more likely to be an excuse. Van den Broeke is a little bit of an enigma in the world of cycling, but once you do abandon in a race like the Tour de France, you can't go off and ride another race without getting permission from the organisation of the Tour, because you have to have a real good reason for giving up this race. Otherwise they will make sure you don't race for the next 3 weeks if you give up in the Tour de France.
I think Frank van den Broeke needs to go away from this bike race and sit down probably with a psychologist or a psychiatrist, because I think he's got some mental problems, and he's certainly not as dedicated to the sport as he should be. He's a very talented bike rider. He's got probably one of the biggest talents the sport has to offer, but certainly if your mind is not on it, and if you're not prepared to live the life of a professional cyclist, you cannot perform when it comes to a 3-week bike race like the Tour de France.
True, and riders are actually saying to us that they'd seen him smoking in the hotels, can you believe, when he's riding a race like this.
Well, absolutely remarkable. It's a shame, really, because he comes from a very long family of cyclists, and I actually raced with his uncle. As we see here, an attack coming at the front of this group of 8 riders. They're accelerating as they head towards the summit of the climb. In fact, his uncle, Jean-Luc van den Broeke, was absolutely, completely dedicated to the sport of being a professional cyclist, and it's a pity that Frank doesn't have the ability to be dedicated as his uncle was.
Well, it's his teammate now, Nico Matin, who's making all of the headlines because he wants more King of the Mountains points, and he's sprinted clear. He's being chased by Santiago Botero and our camera as we get up towards the summit here. So this has been another big effort by the rider from Cofidis, and he really is turning out to be superb. So Matin gets the points there, and then behind him I think it was Santiago, yes it was, Botero. So he gets 5 points for that.
That was a pretty hard sprint there, Phil, for just 5 points. But for Nico Matin, he's going to keep chipping away, I think, at this competition as much as possible and keep himself high up there in the rankings. And who knows if there is a problem with one of these riders from the Kelme squad over the next few days, because who knows what the weather conditions are going to be like. He could be the rider taking over the lead in that competition, because all reports coming from the Alps right now is that the weather is absolutely atrocious. And we have heard that the 2 major climbs of the Tour de Galibier and the Izoard for the moment are blocked with snow.
Well, let's hope it clears up. I'm sure it will. Everything stops for the Tour de France, even the snow. Let's hope so. Anyway, back to the main field here, and there we have Benesto. They've forced themselves to the front and taken all the pressure off the day for the US Postal team, who now can go into second ranking and look after their teammate and leader, of course, Lance Armstrong.
Well, this is the penultimate climb of the day. This is the Côte de Montmorency, and I have to say it's a lot longer than I would have thought for a 4th category climb, and certainly it could have done with something like a 3rd category rating. The ratings of the climbs are really dependent on the length and severity, but the strange thing is, Phil, as we get into the middle of the Tour de France, the 4th category climbs certainly do seem to be an awful lot harder than they are in the first week.
Yes, on the flat sections of the Tour de France in Normandy and Brittany, some of the climbs you hardly realise you've gone over them, and they give them a tag like 4th category. Here we have a 4th category, and it really is a bit of a tough one for the riders today. But once over the top, they then set fare for Mont Ventoux. We're heading to Bedouin. Once through that village, the road starts to go up steadily at first through the trees, then it kicks, and then it becomes an absolute brute. And there's the American flag there, and the man looking out. Well, Lance has just gone past you, sir. Doesn't matter. The American flag flying high and indicating to us they're now riding into a headwind.
Well, Armstrong sitting very much in the middle of the group there. He does have 3 or 4 teammates around him, so he will feel fairly comfortable. And 2 of those guys are the mountain men, the men he expects a lot of on the slopes of the Mont Ventoux. Tyler Hamilton is right there, as is Kevin Livingston. And he's actually said he hopes that they don't have as bad a day as they did in the Pyrenees, because those are the 2 riders, really, Phil, who were the riders who did the most work for him last year in the Tour de France on all of the mountain stages. And if they have a bad day today, Lance Armstrong will once again find himself isolated on these slopes.
Yes, that's something I think the riders are interested in noting as well, because they also felt his team wasn't quite as strong around him this year. And they'll be looking for a weakness now, because that's the only hope they've got of closing down some of these time gaps, which were opened up on just that 11 kilometres of Hautecam last Monday. This is the bunch over the top, and they're saying it's 2 minutes 45 seconds now. 2 minutes 45, so they've had a very good climb.
Well, the main field have really put the hammer down on that ascent there, and it's all really because of the white jerseys of the Benesto squad from Spain. Over the summit of the climb there, Phil, of the Côte de Montmorency, they have 31 kilometres to go to the finish, and normally on a flat stage they'd be looking at around about 45 minutes of racing. Today they're looking at around about 1 hour 10, 1 hour 15 before they get to the summit.
Yes, and that's for the good ones. The others will be out there a lot longer than that, and probably struggling against elimination today. Because it's not just the slope of Mont Ventoux today, it is the gale force winds in the last 5 or 6 kilometres, which are just coming sweeping across Provence and straight over the top of the mountain here. It's the Mistral which blows down the Rhone Valley, which is causing the problems today, and it really is in angry mood.
It's an unbelievable mood, and it's very cold at the surface here, and I reckon 1 or 2 of these riders, they will get away from the top of the Mont Ventoux as quickly as possible. And the Tour de France today have put in a fairly intricate evacuation from the summit of the climb. In fact, the opposite side of the climb has been closed off to the public, and that is for the Tour de France to actually drive off the mountain once the race is finished, and they're keeping that road closed until 11 o'clock tonight. Banesto really have been one of the great teams over the last 10 years, Phil. This is the team that took really initially Pedro Delgado to a victory in the Tour de France. In those days it was sponsored by Reynolds. Then they came across here to take over Banesto, and that became really the era of Miguel Indurain.
Well, they were all together, but now they've arrived on the slopes of Mont Ventoux, and there are 8 leaders with 1 minute and 20 seconds over the field. And I'll give you the names. They are Christophe Agneluto, Vincenti Garcia Acosta, Santiago Botero, Nicolas Jalabert, Alexander Vinokourov, Andrea Kivalev, Nico Matan and Pascal Hervé. But the tempo, which has been going on now, I would say, for the last 40 minutes by the Banesto team, they're down to about 120 now, Paul, and we're 2 kilometres on the climb.
It's coming down even more. 1 minute and 12 seconds is the last time check we've got. A little touch of the hand there going to Tyler Hamilton from Kevin Livingston, just so that Hamilton will accelerate and keep them towards the front of the main field. The pace, though, Phil, is absolutely unbelievable, bearing in mind we've still got an awful long way to go to the summit of this climb, and Jan Ullrich looks quite comfortable just now.
Well, as we speak, Paul, we've heard that David Miller has been dropped. He was involved in that crash. We think he has injured his shoulder. He's been dropped immediately, but he's not alone, because the green jersey of Eric Zabel has gone, and Abraham Olano is in trouble at the back.
Well, I don't believe it. Abraham Olano started the day in 13th place overall. This man has been an eternal hope for the Spaniards to finish high in the overall rankings, and he has never really, Phil, been able to manage the big climbs. He's a great time trialist, he's a very aggressive bike rider, he's able to win the short stage races of 8 or 9 days, but he seems to be developing a psychological problem with the big mountain passes.
Absolutely, he just gets this mental block in the Tour de France. He cannot produce his best riding form. A man who can climb like Olano really should not be in trouble at this early stage of Mont Ventoux. But this is a very, very fast pace here on the lower slopes of Ventoux, and it's going to hurt an awful lot of riders. Jan Ullrich is sitting there in that pink top to his jersey, looking good and just keeping an eye on the 3 Banesto boys. So too Lance Armstrong. He's no reason to do anything other than follow the wheels, because he's got all the time he wants right now.
Well, this is a big tactic today. You can see there's Marco Pantani moving forward, wearing number 71. He will try and do something special today. He wants to get back his title of the best climber in the world, a title he will have to rip off the shoulders of Lance Armstrong. Armstrong, for the moment, very comfortable. Look at the pedaling style there, just sitting comfortably on his machine, ticking over at a very high cadence. And the other day, Phil, it was remarkable to see Armstrong was pedaling around about 100 RPM.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. It is really hard to pedal so quickly and to keep up speed like that. But there is Armstrong down there, and he's got the Pyrrhus on his shoulder now. And I think Pantani waiting to see if he can launch an attack here. Now, it's good to see this is Tyler Hamilton who has come to the front, and Kevin Livingstone. So these boys out to prove a point to Lance Armstrong, I think, and they've got control of the peloton. They've taken it off Banesto, and Armstrong has come onto the wheel of his 2 teammates. Here's Olano at the back of the race, first pictures. He really is in trouble here. He's been tailed off the main field.
He's going to lose big time today, Phil, because he's been dropped at the very foot of the climb. Here he is up alongside Yaroslav Ekimov, a teammate of Lance Armstrong. And Ekimov, I don't want to be derogatory, is not a great climber, and he shouldn't really be up alongside Abraham Olano. Olano should be in this group right now, but he's not able to follow the pace being set by the team from Spain, the team Banesto. But immediately they felt that they were strong enough. The 2 riders from US Postal, Tyler Hamilton now in first place and Kevin Livingston in second, have moved forward to keep the pressure on for Lance Armstrong.
And it sounds as though Andrei Kivalev has now been dropped by the front runners as well, so we should pick him up pretty soon now. The gap cannot be that far. Olano in trouble along with David Miller today, sadly for us, after that crash through no fault of his own. And also behind the green jersey of Eric Zabel. That perhaps a little bit more predictable. This is not the favourite terrain for Eric.
Another big rider's name who's been dropped from this group of riders being led by US Postal is in fact the Italian national champion Michele Bartoli. So a lot of riders popping off the back of the group here. It looks as if that was Nicolas Jalabert who was in fact just caught there and passed by the front train of the US Postal, and Armstrong not able at the moment to ride on the back wheel of his teammates. Here is Agneluto, another man who is in that leading group of 9 riders, being picked up by the fast train.
Taking a good look here to see who's left in the peloton as well. And Giuseppe Guerini has also been dropped by the peloton, and that's the man that won the stage to Alpe d'Huez last year, so surely he must be ill.
He could well have had a bit of a difficult day getting over the rest and transfer day. On the other hand, though, Phil, Ullrich is looking very strong. Remembering back to when Ullrich was beaten in the mountains by Marco Pantani on a very bad day in the Alps when the weather was absolutely atrocious, he actually bounced back incredibly and ripped the race to pieces 2 days later, and that may well be what he's thinking about at the moment. Psychologically, he said he hasn't laid down the flag. He's actually going to keep challenging Armstrong all the way to the finish, and at the moment he's riding comfortably alongside the yellow jersey.
So we're on the climb of Mont Ventoux. There's still an awful long way to go up this climb. The breakaway has begun to split up now, and the tempo in the main field, that's what's left of it, is being led now by US Postal.
Well, another big name going out of the back, the challenger from Holland, Michael Bogaert, has been dropped from this group, which is now starting to become a very select group of bike riders. Christophe Moreau, the French rider from Festina, in 3rd place in the rankings. He's still in there riding very comfortably, and he says he's amazing himself from day to day. He's so surprised that he's able to stay with these big challenges in the mountain passes.
Well, these 2 boys at the front with their zips pulled down are going to go as long as they can, and then they'll peel off and hope that Lance Armstrong can look after himself on the climb to the summit. If you look in the shadows there, you'll see the pink jersey of Pantani. This is Nico Martin, who's coming back from the breakaway group now, having done a pretty good ride again today and prepared to hang on. He is an amazing rider because, look, he's lifted his pace. He did this the other day when he was caught in the Pyrenees, and for a while found his legs to go back into the group behind.
Well, a chance just to see who is in that group. The 2 riders at the front, Hamilton followed by Livingston, followed by Armstrong. On Armstrong's wheel, the pink telecom of Jan Ullrich. Christophe Moreau is the next rider in the line there, and very comfortably in this group for the moment as well is Alex Zuller. Moving forward as well, the riders from Mapei, and in this group is Manuel Beltran and Daniele Nardello, but the acceleration is coming now from Jan Ullrich.
Well, this is the lead group actually, Paul, and this is his teammate Vinokurov. Little trick of the cameras that moved up to the leaders over just a few meters. We are just 3 riders left here now, so it'll be Agneluto, Vinokurov and Botero. They are the only riders left apparently at the front now as the group is coming up.
Well, Vinokurov wearing 67. I'm surprised to see, Phil, that in fact Botero is not the man setting the pace here, because he is certainly the best climber from this leading group. But you can see a little further down the road, you can see the front of the yellow jersey group of Lance Armstrong. Botero, Hervé and Vinokurov are the last remnants of that leading group of riders, of breakaways, which was going clear from the front of the main field after just 41 kilometers of racing, and they look like they're not going to survive very much longer.
Where they are now is really where the Mont Ventoux starts to bite. It is quite steep here as the breakaways are coming back, because this is the other Banesto riders, Vicente Garcia Acosta. And there's only 3 riders left up the front now, Pascal Hervé, Vinokurov and Botero.
Well, this group has become very slick. There is Escartin at the back of the group, the Kelme rider in the lime green. And this group, Phil, has really been reduced dramatically in numbers. The 2 Banesto riders there are Alex Zuller and Jose Maria Jimenez. Jimenez is just moving forward now on the left-hand side in the white jersey. But what a job being done on the front by US Postal riders Tyler Hamilton and Kevin Livingston.
Oh, this is tremendous pace racing, because they've split what was left of the bunch into 2. And there's only about 12 riders here now. And this is giving Lance Armstrong exactly what he wanted from them. And he did say the other day that he would like to see just a little bit more effort from Tyler and Livingstone. But I must say that they're giving it now, because they've got Alex Zuller in a bit of trouble too.
Well, Zuller gasping for air there, his mouth wide open. That's Christophe Moreau, 101. He's the leader of Festina. He's in 3rd place in the overall rankings. And in fact, he has been dropped. Zuller and Moreau have both been dropped from the yellow jersey group. In there to help him was Leonardo Pipoli, the small climber on the Banesto squad. But this is the damage that is being done by Armstrong's teammates on the front of the pack.
Well, Zuller there, his own team are doing the chasing, and now they've hurt him so much he's fallen back. But the group contains a number of little Kelme riders here. Haven't seen the King of the Mountain. Yes, there he is, off to the right now. So Javier Ochoa is in the thick of the action again. Had a pleasant word to say to Lance Armstrong this morning as they lined up for the start and shook hands. And Ochoa is right at the sharp end on the climb here.
The other Kelme rider in this group as well is a man who may well be a challenger for the victory at the end of the day, Roberto Heras. He wears number 24.
So we're looking now at what is the remnants of the leading group here in the Tour de France on Mont Ventoux, and a vicious attack being put in by Alexander Vinokourov, and only Santiago Botero can go. So the other man, Pascal Hervé, is on his way back to the chase group of the peloton.
And in that chase group is his teammate Richard Virenque. A great acceleration there by Vinokourov, but you're not going to surprise this man, Santiago Botero. He's from Colombia. He is an excellent climber, and he's ridden himself back onto the wheel of the small rider from Kazakhstan on the Kelme squad. Here is the Devil, and he's probably wishing some luck to the US Postal Riders today, and maybe some more luck to Jan Ullrich, because this man is from Germany.
Well, it looks as though Tyler Hamilton and Kevin Livingstone have really caused a lot of damage with their pacemaking today. They've got rid of Christophe Moreau, the third place rider overall. I haven't seen Mark Wouters, although I think he is in this lead group, and certainly the King of the Mountains leader. There is Marco Pantani. The other man in serious difficulty is Alex Zuller, and way behind now is Abraham Olano.
But surprisingly enough, in this group is the man who wears 51, Laurent Jalabert, another man who was put into difficulty on Haute-Cam, a man who was in fact dropped on the Col de l'Aubisque and rode himself back into the bike race. He survived for an awful long time. It looks as if Tyler Hamilton has put up the white flag. His job has been done. This is the face of Alex Zuller, though. Phil, you can just see how difficult this climb is.
He's going to have some company, Paul, because look at this. Also being dropped now is Escartine, another great climber blown away. He's on his way back, and that is Jimenez. What is going on here? All the top climbers are being shelled out by that fine pacemaking by Hamilton and Livingstone.
Well, a few more riders. Angel Casera, who is also high in the rankings, he's 10th. He's gone out of the bike race. Escartin has been dropped. There is Heras. This is Pantani. He's not able to follow the pacemaking either. Laurent Jalabert has been dropped behind as well. We're now down to just 5 men in this group. Kevin Livingstone on the front. Lance Armstrong, Jan Ullrich. The other man in there looked as if it was the rider from Polti. That was Richard Virenque. And in fact, Belocchi is the rider from Festina.
Yes, indeed. The surprise of the Tour in Joseba Belocchi. Because they've also got rid now of just about everybody of note here. We're going to be left with just Armstrong if we keep this up on the climb up Mont Ventoux. There is still a long way to go, a lot of time to be gained, and indeed a lot of time to be lost. The King of the Mountains leader, Javier Ochoa, also now disconnected from that leading group.
Yeah, Phil, we haven't even come to 10 kilometers to go. There's still an awful lot of climbing to do. But look now at the face of this man on the front. This is Kevin Livingstone. He will be riding with just one thing in his mind, just to keep the legs ticking over for as long as possible. All he is trying to do is to pace his leader. His leader is Lance Armstrong. Armstrong here in the yellow jersey is again on this mountaintop finish doing damage to all of the other challengers, the big climbers.
Richard Virenque is the rider going through there with 151. He will wait as long as he can and might try to think of a finish. Belocchi, this is Christophe Moreau, in fact, Belocchi's teammate, and it looks as though Christophe is now in serious trouble as we pan up towards the leaders. And still other Festina riders here trying to coax him along and keep him in touch. The Pirate is just about hanging on board this ship.
Well, the Pirate, 71, the former best climber in the world, is riding himself back into contention on the slopes of the Mont Ventoux. He was caught out there by the acceleration of Tyler Hamilton, but I think in fact they have slowed down somewhat, because Laurent Jalabert too is recovering and riding himself back into the group of the yellow jersey.
Well, a fine return then by Laurent Jalabert as he comes back up to it. It also looked as though Pantani was in difficulty, but he's got himself back onto the group here.
Jalabert's a tough bike rider, Phil. I tell you, he will not lay down arms. He will fight all the way to Paris. He actually had an article in the French newspapers over the rest day there, and he absolutely slammed all the other French riders in the race. He said they don't have the courage to get out there and attack. It is really remarkable to hear them whinging all the time about not being competitive in the classics, and yet they come to the Tour de France and they're not competitive either. They need to concentrate on actually fighting to go to the front of the bike race rather than sitting at the back.
Well, Paul, we've just seen the capture of both Vinokourov and Botero, so there's nobody in front of this group on the mountain now. And it's still being led here by Kevin Livingstone.
It's a long way to go, Phil. I really worry about what's going to happen to these guys at the front of the bike race, because at the end of the day we're going to see some astronomical time gaps. We haven't come to 10 kilometers to go. There is still around about 15 kilometers of climbing to get to the summit of the Mont Ventoux. This really is a vicious mountain. They are now in the point of the climb, Phil, where they are averaging around about 10% gradient, and you can see the climbers are under difficulty here. This is the leader in the King of the Mountains competition, Ochoa. He was on that long, huge breakaway, holding on to win the stage at Hautecam. Pascal Hervé has also been dropped. He was earlier in the leading group at the start of the climb.
Well, I think we've got 9 riders surviving now on the climb of Mont Ventoux. Bellocchi, Ulrich, Armstrong, Veronk, Pantani, Jalabert, Vinokourov, Botero and Livingstone. And that may have even thinned out now.
Well, Marco Pantani is going to try and recuperate as much as possible. Jalabert once again going off the back of this group. Jalabert will ride sensibly now, though, Phil. He won't try and stay in that group of the major contenders. He will ride at his own pace. He will ride to make sure he doesn't lose too much time before he gets himself to the summit of this mountain. But one other rider who, if he was thinking of challenging for the overall standing, should have been here is Bobby Julich. We have no news at all of the position of Bobby Julich on this slope.
This is Marco Pantani, the man that used to dictate affairs in the mountains, just dangling off the back of the lead group here. Jan Ulrich, second overall at 4 minutes 14, riding, looking comfortable on the shoulder there of Lance Armstrong. Here's Pantani, and he's just settling in here and hoping he can survive, because he knows that Mont Ventoux, it's yet to get difficult.
It's still a long way to go. This is unbelievable. These are the big names. These are the men who are going to fight it out, but they still won't fight it out for another half an hour or so. We've got an awful long way to go till we get to the summit of this climb. Livingston now, you can see the pain starting to appear on his face. He's out of the saddle. This is a vicious climb. It's a climb where you can't stay in the saddle for long periods of time. You have to continue to get out and accelerate. And you can see Pantani is accelerating here past Vinokourov. Vinokourov was in that leading group as they hit the bottom of the climb, but he is being left behind.
Yes, it looks as though Alexander is being dropped there as Pantani quickly realises it and jumps around him. We're looking at Richard Veronk here, 5 times the King of the Mountains in the Tour de France. A likely winner today in my book if he can just find the effort towards the end, and looking for the points too, because he's not the leader by far at the moment, but he'll take heart from the fact that the King of the Mountains leader, Ochoa, has now been dropped.
But the man who's in front of him in that competition is still in this group. He wears number 22. That is Santiago Botero. He was in the leading group earlier on today, and he's now ending up being the only survivor of that group of 9 riders who escaped after 41 kilometers.
Jalabert here, 8 seconds is official time gap now on those riders just in front. Well, the one rider just in front, watch this now as it kicks around this corner. This is one of the steepest bends, and ouch, as he finds his legs and accelerates over the top of that. This crowd here on the lower slopes, don't forget, of Mont Ventoux, enjoying quite warm conditions and the shelter from the wind.
Jalabert doing a good ride, Phil, because he's actually keeping himself pretty much in contact with this group of major leaders of the Tour de France so far. He was then given a time deficit of 5 seconds over this group, and he will just ride this climb at his own pace. You can see every time there's a slowing in this group, being led still by Kevin Livingstone. The Frenchman who wears 51 is slowly pulling himself back. Now the attack comes from Kelme. Armstrong is not going to respond just yet.
No reason for Armstrong to counter this attack here, none at all. This is Heras having a go, and he was a rider that fancied by many to go for the win today, and he's putting an attack.
Well, in fact, he was actually pulled back there immediately by Lance Armstrong. Armstrong came straight up there to respond to that acceleration by Heras, and immediately you can see the climber there from France, Richard Veronk, is very much there as well. Armstrong, with that acceleration, Phil, now has lost his teammate. Kevin Livingstone has done a great job over the first few kilometers of the Mont Ventoux, but now it's every man for himself. Nobody here has a teammate apart from the 2 guys from Kelme. Botero is in here as well as Roberto Heras.
And just as poor old Jalabert got on the back, he's now having to do it all again here because that acceleration hurt, and he's still following Vinokourov. As you can see, the gap opened immediately with that attack by Roberto Heras. He's put the Pirate in trouble too, and Pantani has been dropped also now by that front group.
Well, this is not surprising, Phil. Bear in mind, this man was out of the sport for 11 months. He was kicked out of the Tour of Italy at the end in the month of June in 1999 for registering a high level of hematocrit. His first race back in competition was the Giro d'Italia this year, and it's impossible to keep the form and the strength in depth that you need for a big stage race like the Tour de France, having spent 11 months out of the sport.
Well, we've only got 6 riders now at 10 kilometers to go. Heras, Belocchi, Ulrich, Armstrong, Veronk and Bottero. They are the leaders now. And sitting here at the back, it's Heras talking to Lance Armstrong. Well, I can't imagine in what language.
Well, actually, Lance speaks quite a bit of Spanish. He's picked up quite a lot of Spanish over the last few years, and actually he does speak French, but he tries not to speak it to the press because he's a little worried about the translations from French into English. So he tends to keep to his English language when open with the press. But actually on the road he can speak French and Spanish fairly well. Ulrich is now the man coming forward to set the pacemaking. But all of these riders, I think, are going to neutralize each other for the next few kilometers, and then we will fight out as we get closer to the summit of the climb. And this neutralization is actually going to be good for Marco Pantani, who once again, Phil, is recovering and riding himself back onto the leading group, and that will make 6 men at the front of the race.
And what about this Festina wonder boy, Paul, Belocchi? Because if he stays in this group, he'll be 3rd overall in the Tour tonight.
Well, that will be remarkable. He'll take over the place of his teammate Christophe Moreau, who started off the day in 3rd place in the rankings. But Joseba Belocchi certainly has been a revelation on the international cycling circuit this year, and he's proving that he is a real force for the future. He's a very young rider, and this, I think, is his first year when he really has shown at all. It's his first year as a professional bike rider, and really the most important thing that he's did this year was lead the Tour of Romandy and end up finishing in 2nd place in the overall standings.
He's just over 26 years of age, and he's in this group now, getting a taste of his first Tour de France as Ulrich, a man who's won it once and finished 2nd twice, and now trying to be best of the rest. He lies 2nd and keeps looking over his shoulder. Well, Armstrong is having no difficulties just now. Roberto Heras and Bottero are the 2 Kelme boys up here, and again stealing a march in the team race.
Well, Kelme are going to climb even further up, and despite the fact that you could see that Banesto was the team trying to set all of the pacemaking on the front, they are trying to be the best Spanish team in the Tour de France, but this year I don't think they're going to do it. They're going to have a hard time, Phil, rivaling the Kelme squad, because on all of the mountain stages we've had 4 or 5 Kelme riders in the front, but Kelme's main star is not here. Fernando Escartin, he for the moment is around about 1 minute behind this group.
Well, the man who's doing a ride just off our camera is Laurent Jalabert. He is only 15 seconds behind this group, completely riding at his own speed. They're accelerating and slowing, and he is just monitoring them and just 15 seconds back. That's a great ride for him.
It's a remarkable ride. Jimenez, by the way, is 22 seconds behind at the moment. So the slowing down by this group of leaders here is allowing some of the other riders who were earlier put into difficulty to recover somewhat. But I really have to admire this man. This is the man who wears 51, Laurent Jalabert. He's a tough bike rider. He's just like Sean Kelly. He's got ambitions to try and ride to the podium in Paris, but he too is a man who has a hard time in the mountains, but he never gives up. He always keeps fighting, and he never lays down arms.
As he climbs up here now, he'll get all the cheers from the crowd, and it's a marvellous crowd here. As we're going back up to the leaders, which contains Lance Armstrong, Roberto Heras, Belocchi, Ulrich, Veronk and Bottero. They are the leaders. This is again still Vinokurov hanging on in. No, it's not, sorry, this is Pantani, who is still trying to get back up to the leaders. So he seems also to have limited his losses just now, and he's climbing at his own speed, which, if your name's Marco Pantani, is a lot more impressive than many of the riders behind him, of course.
I think what's important really, Phil, for Marco Pantani this year is to ride himself through the Tour de France, have a full year of competition, and next year this man, I think, will once again be a major threat in the mountains. He is a very talented climber, but having been so long out of competition, he just doesn't quite have the ability to stay with these big leaders at the moment. This is now a leading group of 6 riders, and Ulrich is really putting the hammer down today.
Well, it's good to see that Jan Ulrich is fighting his way back into the picture here in the Tour de France. Lance Armstrong, as he was last year, seems head and shoulders above. Armstrong just climbing smoothly now. onto the shoulder of Heras. Oh, I always thought there was a touch of shoulders there, but there wasn't, as he now keeps an eye on Ulrich, and it might be that Armstrong has detected that Ulrich is rather enjoying this climb.
Well, you could feel the accelerations coming from the German there, and he didn't want to be in 4th or 5th place because of the fact that Jan Ulrich is really putting serious turns of speed on at the front. Armstrong wants to be in 2nd place. If the attacks come from behind, he feels he'll be able to respond to them, but he didn't want to find there was a little break in that group.
And in fact, it's Botero, who is the Kelme rider, who's done an incredible ride today, being in the breakaway since the 45th kilometre, and still they're having the legs to stay with the group that came up. He's the only one indeed from the breakaway that survived, but he's more than survived. He looks to be in no difficulty whatsoever.
He's quite comfortable to be there. He is a superb climber, and we've seen a great breakaway situation by him when he took 2nd on the stage to Revel just behind Eric Decker. But on that day he was able to move up to 2nd place in the King of the Mountains competition, a title that this man, 151, would love to take for a 6th time.
And the comparative comfort of the trees, which occasionally causes 1 or 2 problems with our pictures coming to you from Mont Ventoux, will be over soon, because we'll break out into the moon expanse of the last kilometres to the summit, and it really is a tough climb. Believe me, these slopes are not steep enough yet. They get worse, and then we'll see who the strong men are in this group.
Well, in the last 6 kilometres of the bike race, Phil, this race actually tilts up for another 550 metres. It really is a remarkable climb, and I feel it is the scariest when you do climb out of the tree zone and you get into that desert area which looks like the surface of the moon. That's the area that Lance Armstrong felt was something from a different planet, and an area he will be worried about when we get closer to the summit, because it was in the last 1,500 metres of this major climb here that he was put into difficulty in the Dauphiné Libéré.
And as we watch the leaders on the climb here, a number of riders have given up the chase today, including Tom Steels, a double stage winner, Marcel Wust, also a stage winner. They've both gone, and Jan Kirsipou, the yellow jersey last year, also out of the Tour de France today, and the American rider Chandler Craig. There's certainly that what we know of 7 riders who've given up, and I'm sure there'll be more by the end of the day.
Well, Virenque style now starting to look quite laboured. The man who's won the King of the Mountains title at the Tour de France 5 times. He's sitting at the back here, and he's only hoping that he can stay in contact, because if there's no major attacks in this group, Phil, he certainly is a serious candidate. But I think for the moment the advantage must go to Kelme, because they've got 2 very strong bike riders in this group. 22 is Santiago Botero, and 24 is Roberto Heras. Heras, a former stage winner of a stage at the Tour of Spain, and a very high place in the overall rankings for him, and certainly a man who will be rising up the overall rankings today with this performance.
Looking though at the way Armstrong is riding, Paul, I feel that man is just waiting for the chance to leave them all behind again.
He looks very comfortable. He moved up and down that group of 6 quite easily. As soon as he felt he was in a dangerous position, sitting too far away from Jan Ulrich, he cruised up the outside to position himself in the slipstream of the big German. But I have to say, I do think that Jan Ulrich is in great form this afternoon, and he will be happy, and he will get morale from the fact that he's the man setting the tempo on the front of this group.
And there's Armstrong with his little earpiece in, which allows the team management to talk to him in his ear. But right now, and the same can be said of Ulrich as well, but right now they know exactly what they've got to do. They are the sharp end of the race, and they are leading it up Mont Ventoux. And Jan Ulrich, well, whatever you say about him, the man certainly does try to keep himself in the picture, and he's working very hard at the front today.
Let's not forget Jan Ulrich is 2nd in the overall rankings, 4 minutes 14 seconds behind Lance Armstrong. And the fact is, at the moment, he is distancing himself between anybody in 3rd position. And at the end of the day, it's going to look very likely that Joseba Bellocchi, the Festina rider in this group, will be the man climbing into 3rd place. Armstrong is very comfortable there, Phil, at the moment. He's just sitting on the wheel of Ulrich, allowing the big German to set all of the tempo on the front of this climb. But I have to say that Joseba Bellocchi in the blue and yellow jersey of Festina is the major revelation in this Tour de France, and he's climbing himself right up in the rankings. Armstrong, on the other hand, looks very relaxed. There doesn't seem to be any problem at all. He's just ticking those pedals over, keeping himself nice and controlled. I've been looking over his shoulder to see what the face is like on Joseba Bellocchi, Festina rider in 3rd position.
Well, the Swiss flag is waving there, but Alex Zuller, one of the stars, who again is a long way behind, as Jan Ulrich sets all of the pace here. There's no reason for Lance Armstrong to set it. He may as well let somebody else do it. He's the leader, and he's the man they've got to gain time over. and the way he's riding today, I doubt whether they'll gain a single second.
Well, the attacks will certainly come later on, and I reckon the attacks will come from the Kelme riders, because they are both very good climbers indeed. But I tell you one thing, that the wind up here, Phil, is still absolutely unbelievable. It's gusting at around about 40 to 50 miles an hour, and they're having a hard time actually keeping the barriers in an upright position.
Well, we're commentating from inside a car, and I can tell you this car is rocking as if somebody is shaking it. And it is so windy now, in fact, the organisation have given up with their attempts to put up the finishing line banner and to do the usual lovely job of dressage they do at the finish of a stage of the Tour de France. It'll look pretty ordinary when the riders come up there today because the wind is so strong.
Well, it's turning out to be a pretty dramatic stage, and all the big names and players of the Tour de France are riding at the front of the bike race. Surprisingly enough, though, two big challengers, Abraham Alano and Alex Zuller, were put into difficulty almost immediately this climb started, and they've been left trailing an awful long way behind. Now again an acceleration coming from Ulrich. Lance Armstrong responds very quickly there, Phil. He's immediately out of the saddle and he comes up to Ulrich's shoulder there, and the idea of that is a psychological maneuver just to let Ulrich know that he's not in any difficulty at all.
So interesting, though, the combination of these two Kelme riders. They're looking very cool here. This is Roberto Heras taking a drink, and I think that because of the benefit of the numerical number of them here, two of them, one will attack soon, probably once they break clear of the trees at Chalet-Reynard.
Once we get to Chalet-Reynard, there's still 6.5 kilometers to go to the summit. That really is an unbelievable mountain, this climb here, Phil. It is, I think, one of the scariest mountains because of its reputation. I think the fact that people cast their minds back and know that a rider died on the summit of this climb. Tom Simpson passed away around about 1.5 kilometers from the summit. Eddie Merckx, the greatest rider of all time, when he won the climb here in 1970, after he crossed the finishing line, he actually collapsed and had to be taken into an ambulance and given oxygen to recuperate. And even on that day, I think Eddie Merckx was a little worried about how far he pushed himself.
Yes, indeed, Paul. It was one of the saddest moments in my career. That was actually the first year I was a journalist, and it was a very hard job to report that race. Anyway, we're looking now at much happier times on Mont Ventoux, certainly for the American Lance Armstrong, as he follows the wheel of Jan Ullrich. And Ullrich is simply superb just now. He's not asking anybody else to set the pace, is he? And he knows there must be an attack sooner or later from one of those two Kelme riders. Roberto Heras, by the way, he's not done much this year, only one win this year, but last year he finished 5th in the Tour of Italy and 3rd in the Tour of Spain. And so he's a man for stage races, and he's a man for the mountains, and he's right behind Lance Armstrong now.
This is certainly turning out to be the year of the Kelme team. They are a magnificent team. We saw them ride a superb Giro d'Italia where they were on the attack all of the time in the mountains, and that is where we're heading to, Phil. That is the summit of the Mont Ventoux, 1,909 meters.
And just look at that.
I think there's been a crash. In fact, I think there's been a crash in the group of the yellow jersey. It seems as if somebody touched a wheel there, and let's just see if everybody is still there. There's Armstrong.
I see everybody. I think it was two motorbikes touched, Paul.
That's amazing. They are all fighting to get the photograph of the first attack. All the 6 riders are there, but in fact they did mention that there was an accident, and it may well have been one of the motorbikes trying to get in and get some shots.
Well, it was 2 motorbikes touched, and they've just had an earful from the race referees, I can tell you. But the 6 leaders are safe and sound and continuing to pace up the climb. There is Pantani. He's still reasonably close. Now, this is Chalet-Reynard, and there's a huge crowd here. And just look at the crowd now. They're sitting all over Mont Ventoux because now they come out of the trees, and normally they would go into temperatures in excess of 100 degrees Fahrenheit. But today it is really cold.
Well, today it's absolutely freezing, and that's all, Phil, because of the chill factor. There's the sign on the side of the road, Le Mont Ventoux, 6 kilometers. 6 kilometers of climbing still to go, and the man moving forward now is the one who wears 151, Richard Virenque.
Well, the king of the mountains, 5 times in the past 6 years. If he could win the King of the Mountains this year, he joins Lucien Van Impe of Belgium and the Eagle of Toledo, Federico Bahamontes of Spain, as the only riders to have done 6. But he's being challenged this year by Javier Ochoa. But Ochoa right now is going to score far fewer points than Richard today.
Well, the man likely to take over the lead in that competition today is going to be Santiago Botero. But look at this. Marco Pantani, Il Pirata, the pirate. He's actually climbed himself back into the leading group. He is obviously suffering like a dog today. He's trying to keep himself in contact. He's trying to prove that he is one of the great climbers, and he's now once again in the leading group. It's now 7 men strong.
Richard Virenque is now the trendsetter.
Well, I tell you what, Pantani will be pretty happy to make the junction there, because in that corner, Phil, there were lots of signs in the road for Pantani, because the club, Marco Pantani, his supporters club, have turned out in their force today to come and hopefully witness the victory of the Pirate on the summit of one of the greatest climbs that the Tour de France has to offer, the Mont Ventoux.
So Virenque is setting the tempo now, hoping that he might just snap the elastic of these riders. He is the third man to set the pace in this breakaway. Herras, he tried to attack and lose them. Armstrong was too sharp for that one, and he's put Roberto Herras back into the group here. Pantani is hooked up at the back now, so the Pirate is on board, and it looks like he might be jumping ship here, because he's gone. And Marco Pantani has launched an attack. The cheek of the man, Paul.
The courage of the man, the fact that he's fought his way back into the group. He certainly knows what it's all about. He's gone off on the attack. He's covered immediately by one of the riders there from the Kelme squad. I'm pretty sure, in fact, that is Roberto Herras who's gone across onto his wheel. And the man doing all of the work behind to pull them back together is Belocchi, the rider from Festina, who today is proving his mettle.
Belocchi looking at third place in the Tour de France and a podium finish in Paris today, if he can hold on. And hold on is the wrong phrase, because he's doing a lot of hard riding here. He's the third wheel now. As like all good climbers, the first one fails, you put in another one straight away, and this one may have it.
Well, Marco's gone again. He felt the reaction of the Kelme riders coming onto his wheel there, and once the rest of the group came in, he's launched a second attack. This is the ability that only great climbers have, Phil, to be able to attack again and again and again on an ascent like this. But again, it's Herras from Kelme who's coming across the gap there, and the whole of the group once more coming back together.
Well, Marco Pantani has tried twice now, and the Kelme boys have closed it down, but this time it's a bit of a struggle as they try to finally shut down.
Well, he's still got a slight advantage there, but it looks as if the effort has gone out of his move. He's out of the saddle again, Phil, trying to accelerate, trying to open up that gap. In fact, it's Botero now who's decided to take up the chase behind Marco Pantani. The Kelme rider from Colombia is trying to nail down the gap. The Kelme riders today, Phil, they want this victory, but so does Marco Pantani, who wants to prove that the Pirate is back.
He is back. He's back in the group, Paul, as they've come round him here again. I wonder if he'll try once more. It depends how much he's hurt himself on that climb. You're catching glimpses of the flags, I would think, and you can see how they're blowing now. They've broken out onto the exposed section of the Ventoux, and they continually change direction, and of course so does the wind. And it looks as though Richard Virenque has cracked on the climb.
Well, the accelerations have proved too much for Richard Virenque, and it's all because of the accelerations of Marco Pantani on the front. This guy, Phil, is going to go down fighting. He's come again and again. He's thrown every attack that he's got at these riders in this group. They've all managed to respond, but he's got rid of Virenque for the moment. But the two Kelme riders are able to respond every time to his attacks.
Well, another example of how you get dropped on the climb, but you should never give up, because Pantani came back to the group and has now attacked them twice, and they're very wary of him now because they're afraid he might hit them again. And one thing he is doing, Paul, he's bringing himself to form for the Alps at the weekend.
Ooh, and that's going to be scary. These are the climbs that Marco Pantani loves. The telecom flags out there for Jan Ullrich. Ullrich now moving himself further forward. You can see those flags. They are absolutely out straight, and Virenque is digging deep now to try and pull himself back into this group. A big sigh of relief for him, Phil, as he makes it 7 again, but right off the front, Marco goes again.
Did you see that kick then in the low gear? And Belocchi is the man who digs again, and followed by Botero as they try to get a little group away.
Well, they are getting a little group away. There's no response for the moment coming from Lance Armstrong, who's taken up a position on the wheel of Jan Ullrich. Ullrich, Phil, today is in great form. He's not the man who was in difficulty in the Pyrenees. He's coming back to be a serious challenger in this Tour de France, but that acceleration again has proved too much for Richard Virenque, and again the Frenchman left trailing.
Well, there is Richard Virenque, and coming off the back, but every time he nearly gets on, Pantani launches an attack again, as the French public cheered him on here and tried to encourage him back up to the leaders. You can see the top of Mont Ventoux now, but it is still a long way away.
This is the weird part of the climb. This is when it opens up. It really is like the mountains of the moon. It's completely open. There's hardly a tree in sight, and the wind is howling over the top here, Phil. Pantani is climbing himself back up to being a challenger for this year's Tour de France. He's a long way down in the overall standings, 10 minutes and 34 seconds down, but he's proving today that his climbing ability is back because he just wants to keep kicking and kicking and kicking at this group.
Well, he's climbing up into the top 10 in the Tour de France today, and that'll be far more respectable for little Marco, former winner of the race. And this rider, 102, is climbing up to 3rd place overall, and for him that's an outstanding performance.
Well, Armstrong is in a very nice tactical position here, Phil, because the only person he really has to worry about in this group is number 61 in the pink and white, Jan Ullrich. Ullrich is his closest challenger. He's in 2nd place overall at 4:14. And for Lance Armstrong, I think the only thing he has to do on this climb is control the maneuvers of the German. He's maybe not too worried about the climbers. The only thing that will be in the back of his mind is if he can stay in contact with this group, it's a great chance to get a monumental victory and write his name in the history books.
Absolutely. And 15 seconds the gap now back to Richard Virenque. As these riders continue, look at that barren road up the mountain. You can see the view now, and we're not at the top yet. A magnificent view if you're not riding in the Tour de France. Ullrich more concerned with the view behind him and the whereabouts of the maillot jaune of Lance Armstrong. Took a good look at Lance's face there as Armstrong just came up to the front. There is the road still to go. It just winds its way like a snake all the way to the observatory at the top. It doesn't look that steep from the helicopter, does it? Believe me, it is.
This section here, Phil, we're looking at around about 8.5% gradient, but bear in mind these guys have been climbing this mountain now for around about 40 minutes. Armstrong is taking up 1st place and he's trying to set the tempo here. He's going to wait for the acceleration to come for the climbers. The 2 Kelme riders at the back riding very close together. They will communicate with each other, but you can see the effect that the wind is having on this group. They're fighting all over the road because the wind at the moment is coming right into their faces.
So Lance Armstrong now sets the pace on Mont Ventoux. Richard Virenque is now 16 seconds behind. The Pirate's gone again. Up on the inside he went, and this is his 3rd big attack. And this time there is no reaction.
Well, Armstrong's not going to react. He's going to wait for someone else to set the pace there. But Pantani, what a man. He has hit them I don't know how many times, Phil. He's gone again and again. He was put into serious difficulty on the early slopes, and now he's trying to get himself the stage victory.
Well, this is superb cycling by little Marco. He'll go back into the popularity poll here because everybody thought that he wouldn't do anything in the Tour de France. He didn't. I must say, the way he was riding in the Pyrenees, I thought he might not do anything. But today, he's been off the back, he's suffered, and now he's put in yet another attack, and this one may have worked.
Well, it may have worked, and one thing he did say, Phil, after seeing that attack of Lance Armstrong on Hautecam, he said, the performance of Lance Armstrong has put my feet back on the ground. I realise now what this bike racing thing is all about, but the response has come from Kelme. This is Santiago Botero. Botero, the Colombian rider from the Spanish team, is riding himself onto the tail of the Pirate.
Well, superb riding by Botero, Paul, because this is the man who broke away after only 45 kilometres. Only 2 days ago he had that breakaway of over 200 kilometres. He's obviously got tremendous form this year.
Well, Pantani must keep going now. He's got to keep accelerating. But this young man is an incredible hope for the future. And this, Phil, this performance by the Colombian rider here is why we saw the Banesto squad on the front. They realised the danger of Botero. They realised that Botero has the ability to climb right up in the standings. But the Pirate has kicked once again, and Botero didn't quite manage to make the junction.
Well, he'll ride his own speed right now, Santiago Botero, in his 1st Tour de France, his 1st taste of Mont Ventoux. And this rider here knows all about winning mountain stages of the Tour de France, but he only has won before in the Alps and in the Pyrenees. Now he might be claiming the giant of Provence.
Well, his great hero and his great friend is Charlie Gall, and Charlie Gall was the first man to win at the summit of this climb, and Charlie Gall is at the finish today. All 5 previous winners from the summit of the Mont Ventoux are actually here at the finish line to see this monumental day, but now Armstrong is going to go.
Well, look at this then, Armstrong, and they wouldn't have expected that. Ullrich has done nothing about it at all. He saw the speed and the acceleration of Lance Armstrong, and he's gone off after Pantani and Botero, and they've got nothing left.
Well, look, at that. Ulrich could not respond. He must have heard that attack coming. He must have felt it go by. He looks at the Colombian rider. How are you doing? Thank you very much. Goodbye. I'm now going to chase after the pirate. He's chasing just one man on the road, the man who's in the pink jersey of Mercatoni Uno, and there he is, just there.
Well, this is an incredible demonstration of the sort I don't think I've ever seen in the Tour de France, because Armstrong is toying with the top names of the cycling world. He left them and they knew he was going because they couldn't even raise the pedal length. Now he sprinted straight past Santiago Botero and he's coming up to Pantani. And what will the pirate do when this man gets on board?
Well, he'll try and kick again. He's trying to accelerate, but you're not going to stop the onslaught of Lance Armstrong. The man from Austin, Texas, is controlling this bike race the only way he knows how.
In the Pyrenees, he told us he wasn't interested in the stage. When he's taken a real good look at Marco, almost as saying, the back wheel for you, Marco, jump on if you can. And Marco has done just that. But I think this time, Lance Armstrong wants the victory.
I'm certain he wants the victory. He's looked at the names, he's looked at the history books. He knows the history of the Mont Ventoux. Phil, he was put into difficulty in June in the Dauphiné Libéré, but he came back twice after that to train on this mountain, to learn this mountain, and certainly he knows just exactly what this mountain can do to you. For the moment, he's playing his cards perfectly.
Well, the man who took out all of the time trials and a road race stage at the mountaintop finish of Sestriere last year on his way to victory in Paris is now looking for his first mountain victory and indeed his first stage win of this year's Tour de France.
It's amazing to look at this bike rider, Phil, when you think in 1996 at the Olympic Games, his body was riddled with cancer. He finished 6th in the Olympic Games time trial there, and only a few months after that, he announced that great illness. But he's come back, he's beaten, and he's ridden to the top of cycling's ladder. He is riding now in exactly the same way that Eddy Merckx used to ride his Tour de France's.
And this comes another attack here, and Pantani, rather begrudgingly, has had to get out of the saddle again, but he is rising to the occasion. He's holding Lance Armstrong just now, who probably is struggling a little bit to recover from that incredible acceleration that swept him up to the front man.
He's looking over his shoulder. He wants to know just exactly how Marco Pantani is right now. He knows the reputation of this climber, Phil. He's seen how many attacks Marco Pantani has put in so far. A little word over his shoulder. He may well want, in fact, Pantani to come forward and work with him, because the wind out here is absolutely unbelievable. You could see the jersey on Jan Ullrich. He's fighting against this headwind. The jersey is being ruffled by the wind, which is around about 35 miles an hour. Look at those flags.
And the gap, Paul, back to Ullrich is now 20 seconds. So they've lost 20 seconds in that one sprint up to the front by Lance Armstrong here. He's got that cool-looking face again. It looks as though he has recovered. Pantani here looking a little bit worried. But I don't know where he's found it from, but he really has done a superb ride today, Pantani.
Pantani's a star. He's won the Tour de France and the Tour of Italy, and now he's riding himself back into the sport of professional cycling. 11 months out of the sport, and he's proving once again that he can be a climber. He's launched so many attacks, Phil, but amazingly Armstrong is such a patient rider now. When Armstrong turned professional, he was impulsive. He would not wait and ride tactically. He had to do it. When he felt good, he went off the front. But in this Tour de France, he's watching everybody's move and reacting when he wants to.
Well, there's the finish, but it's still a long way to go because we twist around this mountain rather like a helter-skelter. But the American flags are flying high and strong right now as Pantani is now helping out Lance Armstrong here, not afraid to go to the front and set the pace. And we've just gone past the memorial there to Tommy Simpson, the rider who died in this race on Mont Ventoux on the 13th of July, 1967. And Lance Armstrong goes by in the yellow jersey. The jersey that Tom never wore, or he wore once, but in the race he died, he didn't. And was the race he really felt he could win that year.
You can see the wind is really having a major effect on this breakaway, Phil. You can see the jersey of Lance Armstrong rippling in that wind at the moment. Armstrong is in such incredible form. He's looking at the face of Marco Pantani. He wants to know whether Pantani can follow his accelerations. But Pantani is digging so deep today. Armstrong kicks once again. Can the pirate follow?
I'm not sure, because the elastic was stretching a bit there, and it is just about dead straight now as Pantani is coming slowly back up to the wheel here. What a fantastic show of defiance by Marco Pantani. I think Lance went up to Pantani, Paul, because he fears Pantani will refine his form when we go down to the Alps, and he's taking all the time he can get while he can get it.
That's what all the riders in the Tour of Italy were worried about. They didn't want to give Marco Pantani an easy ride in the first 15 days. They knew they had to put a lot of time between themselves and Pantani before they came to the final Alpine stages. And in those Alpine stages, in the last week of the Tour of Italy, Marco Pantani was the strongest climber. Armstrong's acceleration there was not able to get rid of Pantani.
This reminds me of the battle between Ulrich and Pantani. When Ulrich was in yellow and Pantani took him on the mountains, and they broke away together. And now we've got a similar situation, except Ulrich isn't second overall this time around, but he is just hanging on to the man who very definitely is #1 in the Tour.
Armstrong setting the tempo now at the front. There's still an awful long way to go to the finish, Phil, and this has been an unbelievable ascent of this mountain. Armstrong has played his cards perfectly, close to his chest. He's waited, he's watched all the climbers attack each other. He's watched Marco Pantani attack on more than 10 separate occasions. He waited until he felt was the right time, till he came to the point of the course where in fact he was put into difficulty in the Dauphiné Libéré, and he's actually conquered his fear of that climb.
He's certainly done that today. He's taken on Mont Ventoux and he's shook it out, and he's proven that he really has no fears on these slopes. There's still a little way to go, but the longer to go, of course, the better for the chase group, Paul, or the worse for the chase group rather, because they're losing so much time.
They're losing huge signs. In fact, we are not going to get an idea of exactly where the last kilometre of the bike race is today. Because of the wind, they haven't been able to put up the Flamme Rouge. But Armstrong will know the finish. He will know where the finishing line is. He's been here, he came here in the Dauphiné Libéré, and he's been out and looked at the course. Just a little further down the road, just 200 metres behind, you can see Jan Ullrich is moving himself slowly but surely back up to the American.
Well, I think we are actually in the last kilometre, Paul. Because it's not too far past the Simpson Memorial, which we passed about 500 metres ago. So we're just about 1 kilometre from the summit now, and you're right, it does look as though those riders behind are just still about 20 seconds back and may well be closing in. But Armstrong, who has really made the Pirate suffer, but the Pirate has refused to get off, and he might well try to take Lançon in the sprint.
Well, Armstrong is sitting in first position here. The Pirate tried to come up alongside him. The Pirate, let's not forget, Phil, is a very good sprinter, but Armstrong certainly wants this stage. He's setting the tempo over the last few hundred metres as we come towards the finish of this monumental stage, and Armstrong has blown away all of his rivals on this very difficult summit.
And there is now just 100 metres to go. I don't know if the riders know that, because there's no signage at all today because of the wind. But in fact, Lance Armstrong is about to make the final turn for the finish. What an ascent of Mont Ventoux for both of these riders. And except Pantani, Armstrong is gaining time over everyone. Now, is he going to take out his first stage win in this year's Tour de France? We can see the line now. I don't know whether they can, because there's only a line on the road. Pantani is on the right, and Armstrong keeping on the pressure here as we start to approach the line now. Pantani grits his teeth and accelerates, and over the line Pantani wins the stage, and in fact Armstrong will have to be content with second place. Now further down the mountain, here's the same corner again, and this is now Bolocchi. The clock is counting, 15 seconds has gone by, and this little man Bolocchi has dropped Jan Ullrich on the sprint for the line. He'll be third overall tonight and threatening Jan Ullrich because he's leaving him behind. Bolocchi comes over 25 seconds down. Ullrich is fourth, the time gap for him 29 seconds. And more gains for Lance Armstrong today, but first let's have a look at the results. Il Pirata, Marco Pantani gets the win over Armstrong. Yoshiba Bolocchi climbs to third. Of the other big names, Richard Virenque finished seventh, and top young rider Francisco Mancebo was eighth, only 1 minute 23 back. Fernando Escartin 17th, Alex Zuller lost 3 minutes 12, Mark Wouters lost 6:45, Abraham Alano almost 10 minutes. Marco Pantani gets his first win for more than a year tonight, and here he is on the homemade podium. He's done it on a day 9 riders abandoned the race. David Miller in trouble on Ventoux after his crash. He finished 95th and 17 minutes 5 seconds back. Gary Imlach was waiting for him.
David, nasty looking gash on the side of your neck. What happened in the crash?
They had a sort of stop in front of me. I just went flying over my handlebars and got my neck stuck in a guy's wheel. It was still moving, so kind of hurt. I bashed my knee as well, so it wasn't very nice.
We saw you going back to the doctor's car a few times. How bad is it now?
It just hurts, you know. It's my knee that I'm worried about. The neck will be all right, but I bashed my knee pretty hard, so. Should be all right.
Lance Armstrong continues to gain time and is now 4 minutes 55 ahead of Jan Ulrich. Belocchi is third at 5:52, and Christophe Moreau did well to hold on to fourth place. Pantani is now up to 12th, Zuller is 13th and Escartine 14th. Wouters descends to 17th and Miller goes down to 48th, almost half an hour back. There was no doubt this was another great day for Lance Armstrong, and here he is now talking with Gary Imlach.
Certainly approaching the line, you looked like you had bigger things on your mind than the stage win.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's not. It's nice to win, but it's not important to win every stage or to win stages. It's important to win the overall in Paris.
You've called Marco Pantani the best climber in the world. What does that make you?
I'm just an average climber that has a couple good days every once in a while.
No, to be an average climber then. Lance may not like the climb of Mont Ventoux, but it certainly proved kind to him as he now gets a third yellow jersey.